All right. Hello again, Avengers, and welcome to another exciting in-depth review. Today, we're going to be doing an in-depth review of the new 2024 D&D Player's Handbook. Now, quick reminder, if you do enjoy this stuff, please remember to like the video, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell icon to turn notifications on. All those things are super important. Now, my in-depth reviews are exactly that. They are in-depth. I'm going to talk about the things that I like. I'm going to talk about the things that I don't like. I'm going to talk about the things they did well. I'm going to talk about the things that they didn't that they need to do a little better on. And I go chapter by chapter, sometimes page by page. And in this one, there's going to be a section where I'm going to go class by class. So a lot of people don't want to sit around for an hour and a half, 2 hour, 2.5 hour long video. So at the beginning, I always like to have a section that I call Should I Buy This? So people that are just looking to figure out if they want to buy something can just watch that, go off and get it if they are going to get it, or ignore it and not get it. Now, I break up potential purchasers into 3 different groups. The first group is a group that I call players. Players are people that are going to primarily, not exclusively, but primarily be playing a single character at the table. The second group is a group that I call, we'll try this one more time, Game Masters, or in this case, Dungeon Masters. Dungeon Masters are people that are primarily, not exclusively, but primarily going to be sitting at the head of the table or wherever your Dungeon Master sits and running the game itself. They have very different needs than players to do. The third group is a group that is often overlooked, and I call them lore hounds. These are people that may never sit down at a table, but they're just really interested in the lore and the world and the universes and everything that's contained within the subject matter. So, should you buy this? Well, let's find out. And I need a drink. The first group. Should players buy this? So, this is a really weird one for a number of reasons. Probably the biggest, biggest of those reasons. Wow, I cannot think at all right now. Probably the biggest reason this is a weird thing is D&D 5th edition has existed for a very long time. It's going on 10 years that it's been out. And, sorry, I just need to open up a thing so I have prices. Okay. That's what I thought. Sorry, I need the prices here so I can make my recommendations. So, 5th edition has been around for a while, and there are free versions of the rules. Even the new 24 versions of classes and everything, there is a free version. I haven't actually looked at the free rules of the 2024 revision, but I would assume they work just like the basic rules of the original 5th edition, where you get each class and then one subclass, and then some feats and some spells and everything you need to be able to play the game. So theoretically, you actually don't need to purchase this in order to be able to use these new rules, including some of the more interesting updates. I'm assuming things like mastery properties and stuff like that are going to be something that's included in the new free rules. And I might as well check to see if I can actually look at... Yeah, I do have the new free rules. So I'm just going to check... Oh, wow. The free rules are much more limited. You have Cleric, Fighter, Rogue, Wizard. Only 4 backgrounds, 4 species, some feats that I'm not seeing. They do have mastery properties, so that's there. Yeah, whoa! Free rules is totally different than the basic rules. Okay, interesting. So that gets me more. So as far as for players, there's a lot about the 2024 revision that is interesting. And there's a lot of interesting things that are in here, but I think just about every single player that picks up the 2024 revision is going to have something that they don't like, to the point where I don't think I know a single person that is going to just adopt everything in the 2024 revision as it's written there and just accept everything. The vast majority of people are going to pick and choose the things that they like and get rid of all the stuff that they don't like. And so this presents kind of an interesting dilemma for recommending should players buy this. And the thought process behind that is it really depends on what kind of player you are and what you're interested in. You know, specific builds, there are specific builds that are more powerful and more fun to play in the 2024 revision. There are specific builds that just aren't possible in the 2024 revision. There are some classes that play a lot more interesting and have a lot more cool things that they can do. There are some classes that play completely differently and are going to frustrate people that have been playing them a certain way before and now having to play them a very, very different way now. So being able to give a blanket recommendation of should players buy this, I really don't think I can. Because it's not just your mileage may vary. Depending on what kind of characters you play, you may have a great experience with it, or you may vehemently despise it. And I think that's the biggest problem with the 2024 revisions is they present it as a kind of collected one-piece thing and everything's supposed to work together, and it really doesn't. Like a really good example, the new version of the Barbarian is perfectly fine. I don't think it's a worse version of the class or anything like that, but it plays very differently than the base Barbarian. And some of the most important changes are things like Rage works very differently and is a very active process now. Whereas before, you hit Rage, and as long as you weren't, just kind of running around doing nothing for a few turns, you just turned Rage on and then forgot about it. They also did things like they removed Brutal Critical, which was a major thing. Like Orc Barbarians with Great Weapon Master and Brutal Cleave could outdamage Paladins, to be perfectly honest, because they never had a limited resource built into it. They were just absolute monsters when it came to doing damage, and now they simply can't. Great Weapon Master has been nerfed really, really hard, but there are now situations where ranged characters can take Great Weapon Master and get a benefit out of it. And Rage now, you have to actively be doing something. And if you are ever rendered, I can't remember what the term is. It's not unconscious, but it's the other thing that unconscious happens. Let me go to the rules glossary. Oh, I already have it open. I just can't remember what the damn thing is. Advantage, alignment, area of effect, armor class, attack, blinded condition. Starts with an I. God, my brain is just not working right now, and it's really pissing me off. Incapacitated. If you are ever incapacitated, your rage is gone. And there's a lot of different things that can cause you to become incapacitated. Yeah, I can't really give a hard recommendation either way for players, because there's really no way to tell if you're going to enjoy this or not. There's a lot here that's interesting for new players. If you've never played D&D 5th edition, this is a really, really nice starting point. Chapter 1, Playing the Game, is probably the best introduction to Dungeons and Dragons specifically, and probably role-playing games in general that I've ever seen. It's really, really well done. This is probably the first D&D player's handbook that you can actually read and learn how to play the game pretty well. In general, every single other one, including the 5th edition original Player's Handbook, the best way to learn how to play was to find someone that already know how to play. Because the Player's Handbook was not written for new players. This is written for new players. So if you've never played before, this is a fantastic way to get into it. And when you don't know what it was that you're missing, you're probably going to have a lot of fun with just about everything here. There's still some issues in here that I'm not particularly fond of, but we'll talk about them a little bit more when we're actually doing the in-depth portion of this. If you are a returning player, you really need to research the changes that happened to every single class and every single feat, because there are certain feats that, because of the changes that were made, work incredibly differently in combos. Things like the Sentinel and Polearm Master combo doesn't work in 2024 because they reworded Polearm Master to where it no longer grants an opportunity attack, and so it doesn't actually synergize with the Sentinel feat anymore. And so that combo of, well, I can opportunity attack and stop you in your tracks so you can never touch me, doesn't work. That combo doesn't exist. So yeah, because of that, I have a hard time recommending this to any new players, either physical or digital, or returning players. New players, digital would probably be fine. Physical, if you want to have a book. Digital is $30. Physical is $50. And if you want to get the digital physical bundle, it's $60. So if you want to be able to use all this stuff on D&D Beyond with the character builder and everything, but you still want to have a physical copy, digital physical bundle is probably the best way to go. For returning players, hardcore, you need to actually research what the changes are. Like, there's no easy way to say this. There are some people that are going to like the changes. I have not met a single person that was massively in love with the changes. Most of the people I've talked to have gone, I could see this being interesting, but I haven't seen anyone who's like, oh my god, this is the greatest thing ever. I can't believe that it took this long to do it. Everyone is either kind of lukewarm, it doesn't look bad, or this is the worst thing that they've ever seen. So yeah, as far as players, if you're a returning player, don't buy this until you've done your research. Do the research, check it out. If you've never played D&D 5th edition before, it's not a bad thing to pick up. Do I think it's worth $50 or $60? I'd be hard pressed, but there's a lot of stuff in here. So again, if you've never played D&D at all, or at least never have played D&D 5th edition, there's enough here to justify $50 or $60. But any returning player, don't buy it. Do your research, figure out if there's aspects of this that you actually are going to want to use, and then figure out if you're going to buy it. Because otherwise, I think just too many people are going to be upset. So yeah, moving on. The next group. Should Dungeon Masters buy this? Again, this is another one where it's kind of a weird answer. Is there stuff in here specifically for Dungeon Masters? Not really. Like, this is the player's handbook. We're going to get our own book called the Dungeon Master's Guide in November. So it's not going to be too long until we have something to look at. But if your players want to use any of these abilities and updates and things like that, you need to have a copy of the book. Something that's really nice about getting it on D&D Beyond, if you have a Master Tier subscription, first of all, you get early access, which is how I have access to the book and being able to do this review. But it also, with a Master Tier subscription, you can start a campaign, invite your players to it, and you can share the book with all of your players. which is a great way to cut down on the cost. The players can basically chip in to give you money to get the book, and then you can all share the book. If you're buying physical, that's how it's always been. I know quite a few people for 50 years that what they would do is the players would kind of pool together their money and they would get a copy of each book and then they would all share it. This is an extremely common thing in Dungeons and Dragons, just in general. So that's a really, really nice way to offset the cost and make it very, very cheap. When you're splitting like $60 between 6 people, I mean, it's $10 a piece. You know, that's nowadays that's not even a fast food meal, unfortunately. So that's not bad, and it gives you both a physical and digital copy. But yeah, as far as stuff that the DM is going to use, again, for me personally, there are things from here that I'm 100% going to be using. The new version of the Defensive Duelist feat is so great. I love it. It is just an upgrade from the old version of the Defensive Duelist feat, which the Defensive Duelist feat was a nice feat, but it was so incredibly limited. And especially as a monk who has a lot of different reactions that they can use, the Defensive Duelist feat was very useful in a bunch of situations, but there was a lot of situations where just increasing your AC for one attack was just not good. And now when you use the Defensive Duelist feat, it basically works like the shield spell. Until the start of your next turn, you have the increased AC. It's so nice. It's so great. So, and then like the new healing spells, all they did is they doubled the amount of healing that they do. But it's still really, really useful, and I'm definitely going to be doing that. So for GMs, if you're willing to take the time to read through everything and then pull out the pieces that you like that fit with your game, which may be different from the pieces that I pull out and I like, and that's perfectly fine, then yeah, I would say definitely pick this up, because there are some really good ideas in here, but there's also a lot of really bad ideas and what feels like steps backwards. Like the most glaring example I have seen in here, starting with Tasha's Cauldron of Everything, they stopped tying abilities to ability scores or a number of uses to ability scores, and they started tying it to your proficiency bonus, which was just a better use for a number of reasons. First, it gives you more uses overall. Your proficiency bonus eventually gets to 6. Ability scores are capped at 5. Now, that's not 100% true anymore in this, because there's a few classes that actually get bonuses like the Barbarian used to, where their ability scores will go up to like 24. But the other issue with that is by 8th level, your ability score that is probably tied to number of uses is going to be maxed, especially since the new versions of feats, every single feat now gives you an ability score bonus plus extra stuff, where it used to be there were only some feats that you would get an ability score bonus plus something. A lot of the feats just gave you new things that you could do. So because of that, ability scores are going to be going up higher much faster. Even just using point buy or the standard array, you can start with a 17 in a score, and there's generally only going to be one ability score that's going to be tied to your you can use this a number of times up to your wisdom modifier or something. So at level 4, you can take literally any feat that increases that particular thing, and now you're almost maxed. And then at level 8, just take ability score improvement, and you have now maxed the number of uses for that ability. It's never going to get any more uses until you get to level 20. And that's not for all classes. The old way of, or when they introduced Tasha's, everything was you can use this a number of times equal to your proficiency bonus. So that was a much better way to do it. You didn't just get this, well, once you're at level 8, it's as good as it's ever going to get. Every time your proficiency bonus got higher, which happens 4 times throughout your career, it got a little bit more powerful, and it was a little bit more gradual, and it was more fun. So yeah, you see that constantly in this book, that things that we thought that they had learned, they went, no, we're going to go back to the old way because it was worse. I don't get that. So again, as a dungeon master, you really are going to have to look at all this stuff and go, okay, this thing I'm going to keep, this thing I'm not, this part of this thing I'm going to keep, this aspect I'm not. This is advanced D&D for the dungeon masters, because I would never, I do not know a single person that is going, yeah, I'm just going to take all the changes, because there's a lot of bad changes in here. And I cannot recommend to any dungeon master to just take this and go, okay, everything in here is now legal for all of my games. It would be a nightmare, especially if you've been running games in 5th edition for 10 years. This will mess you up because they change so many kind of minor things, or things that seem minor but become very, very major. Things like 2-weapon fighting. Like, I had a wonderful conversation with someone on the channel where we talked about how the dual wielder feat is worded in a very, very unique way. And if you interpret that in a very, very specific way, it completely breaks martial classes, because it makes dual wielding, if you use weapons that have the nick property, just significantly better than any other martial choice. Like, it's just the right answer every single time. And it's going to massively piss off anyone that has been using sword and board, anyone that's been using great weapons or anything like that. They're going to get really, really upset, because now they're just going to be absolutely trounced by someone that's using a pair of scimitars. Like, it's just no comparison whatsoever. So yeah, do I recommend this for GMs? Yes, with a caveat. If you know what you're doing, pick it up and pick and choose the things that you think are going to make your game better. If you are a new dungeon master, this book is going to make your life more difficult. Just plain and simple. Get a few dozen sessions under your belt before picking this up and trying to start adding some of these options, because it's just going to confuse you. And definitely, if you have players that have been playing for a long time, this is going to get really confusing really, really quick. So, yeah. Moving on. The third group. Should lore hounds get this? Not going to beat around the bush. Don't get it. Don't waste your money. There is so little lore in here, it is painful. This is a textbook. Everything in this book has been shrunk down to be as to use the least amount of words as physically possible. Again, the chapter 1, playing the game, is one of the best written introductions to a new player that I've ever seen. They've got plenty of examples and everything. Whoever wrote chapter 1 was fired after that, or was set ablaze, or was transported to another dimension. They did not touch anything else in this, because everything else is very, very short, succinct, to the point. There are no examples in the rest of the book about how to play this unbelievably complicated game, and it's already causing issues. Like I said, the dual wielder thing is being debated everywhere, and has been for a few months now, as people started seeing it in playtest materials and leaks and other things like that. And currently people are claiming that Crawford at Gen Con said that the broken interpretation of the dual wielder feat is totally the way that it was meant to be done. You know, Billy's sister heard that Tommy saw Ferris faint at 21 Flavors last night. So until I see an official ruling, a sage advice, an actual something from them, there is an article on D&D Beyond talking specifically about weapon masteries, and it specifically states that the Nick property does not give you the ability to get another bonus action attack, and that's what I'm focusing on right now, because again, the way that it's worded in there is bogus. But anyway, getting back to Lore Hounds, there's just nothing here for you. Something like the backgrounds. The backgrounds are really, really interesting. In, really, where the hell, damn it. I can't find it now because, of course, why would I be able to find it? In the 2024 Player's Handbook, each background basically was a page. Now each background is a paragraph, barely. And in addition to each background having basically a page, they also had another page where it just helps you to build your character with suggested, bonds and other things like that, and quirks and all that stuff. All of that is gone. There's nothing in here that a lore hound could use to learn anything interesting about the world. There is no world here. This is a textbook. And I think it is a huge, huge disservice to the book as a whole, because that's part of what makes Dungeons & Dragons so magical, is the lore built into it. So yeah, lore hounds, don't pick up this book. It's not worth it. You're not going to have fun with it. Hopefully, when we start getting supplements and stuff like that, hopefully there will be something in there and it just won't be textbook after textbook after textbook. But as of right now, if this is what we could expect from the rest of the core books, it looks like Wizards of the Coast just doesn't care about lorehounds, which is really, really sad, but it would fit what has been happening with other books recently. Things like Monsters of the Multiverse being very, very lorehound unfriendly. It's kind of the theme that it seems Wizards of the Coast is going in. So anyway, moving on. So those are my recommendations. A real quick revamp of them for players. If you're a new player, go ahead and pick up the book. It's probably going to be a lot of fun for you. If you're a returning player, don't buy this book. Do your research. Figure out if your chosen class or your chosen build or whatever has been nerfed into oblivion, or they have a cool new version of it that might be a lot of fun to play, and then figure out if you're going to buy it. But do not buy this without doing your research first. You are going to get burned. For Dungeon Masters, if you're an established Dungeon Master, pick this up because there's a lot of good stuff in here, but you're going to have to pick and choose the stuff that works best for you, and you're going to have a mind of what is going to break my game. If you're a new Dungeon Master, do not pick up this book. It's just going to confuse you, especially if you've been playing D&D 5th edition for any length of time. This is just going to make everything more confusing. And then for Lorehounds, don't pick up the book. There's almost nothing in here for you, and the few things that are in here for you, you can find other places for free and a lot better. So those are my should you buy it recommendations. If you were just here to figure out if you wanted to pick it up or not, thank you so much for tuning in. In the comments down below, what are you most excited about in the update? Are you interested in the new classes and how they change them? Are you interested in the feats and things like that, or the new origin components, new backgrounds and new species and things like that? Are you interested in how they change spells and how all that works? Let me know in the comments down below. Now, it is time for the in-depth review. As I said before, my in-depth reviews are exactly that. In depth. I'm going to go chapter by chapter, sometimes page by page, and in this particular instance, I'm going to be going class by class for a little bit of it. I'm going to be talking about the things that I like, the things that I don't like, the things that I think they did well, the things I think they need to do better. However, it turns these into very, very long videos, so I do put timestamps into all of these things, so you can kind of jump around to the things that are most exciting for you personally. I will not feel bad in any way, shape, or form if you only watch the section that you are most interested in. It's why I put the timestamps in there. I would prefer if you would watch everything eventually, but I have no problem with anyone coming back and watching this over a few days, over a week or something like that. I know YouTube wants me to tell you to be here the entire time. Just watch it. Watch it 7 times. It is the most amazing thing ever. No. I put timestamps in there for a reason. So find the things that are most interesting to you, and then come back to the other things that may not be as pressing as you go on. That being said, I think it is time for us to start this in-depth review. And I need to open up this. All right, so the first section, the introduction. It's the same as every introduction that has ever been in any book. It has a foreword by Jeremy Crawford. Jeremy Crawford's a wonderful dude. Talks about the stuff that you need. Talks about learn by watching. How to use the book. Worlds of Adventure. It's really, really basic. There's really not that much to go over there, because it's not meant to be anything other than, hey, this is what's in that book. This is what's in this book. So, yeah. Nothing good, nothing bad. It is a perfectly adequate introduction. Moving on. Chapter 1. Playing the game. As I've said many times before, this is probably the best introduction to D&D and introduction to tabletop RPGs that I have ever read. It is brilliantly written. The first thing that you see when you open this book up is a massive wyvern fighting against a spellcaster and 2 dudes with swords. The artwork is incredible. And it's specifically, they have a little caption under it. While adventuring in the Dragonlance setting, the siblings Caramon Magier, Rastlin Magier, and Kitiara Uth Matar provoke the rage of a wyvern. And I'm not a huge Dragonlance fan, so if those are actually like really important characters that I just didn't realize are important characters, I apologize. But the artwork is great, and then the first thing they do is, like, here. In D&D, the action takes place in the imagination of the players, and it's narrated by everyone together. Here's a glimpse at what that looks like. Jared as Dungeon Master. After your long journey, Castle Ravenloft towers before you. Crumbling towers of stone, perhaps abandoned guardhouses, loom over the approach. Beyond them, you see a gaping chasm disappearing into deep fog below. A lowered drawbridge spans the chasm, its chains creaking in the wind. Stone gargoyles stare down at you from the high walls, and a pale light spills into the courtyard from the open castle doors beyond. Philip, as Gareth. I examine the gargoyles. I have a feeling they're not just statues. Maeve, as Mirabella. I want to see how sturdy the drawbridge is. Do I think we can cross it, or is it going to collapse under our weight? And then it goes on from there. They have these little excerpts of an imaginary game interspersed throughout this entire section, and it's wonderful. From a training perspective, this is exactly how you introduce new ideas. You introduce the idea, and then you give practical examples that people can latch onto, that they can kind of stick into their brain, that helps them with retention. And they do this over and over and over again, and it's really, really great. Everything about this is designed for people that have never played an RPG or anything like that, to be able to understand how everything works very, very quickly. Now, what that generally means is that for people that have played before, they're just going to skip this chapter. It's like, I already know how to play. I don't need to do this. That is a huge, huge no-no. Again, because of the almost conversational tone that this chapter is written in, even if you are familiar with how to play, you've been playing for 10 years, you've been playing for 50 years, There's still things that you're going to be able to learn from this, and it's introducing how the revision works. The entire rules for how the new system works are in this first chapter. Now, there is a later chapter. Oh, wait, no, there isn't. Everything is in chapter 1. In the original Player's Handbook, they actually had a separate chapter for combat. They don't. Everything is contained within chapter 1. All the rules for how everything works is all in chapter 1. The only place where there's more rules that aren't 100% in here is the chapter on spells. Does reiterate a little bit on how the spellcasting system works and stuff like that. And probably one of the biggest changes to how spells are cast in 5th edition, which is basically the old system, which was designed specifically to deal with the fact that sorcerers could quicken spells, was if you used your bonus action to cast a spell, then you could not cast any other leveled spells for the rest of that turn. Now, it just says you can only cast one leveled spell per turn. So, doesn't matter if it's a bonus action, if it's an action, whatever. We just know that only one leveled spell. It also means that if you had a cantrip that was a bonus action, it didn't mean that you were now prevented from, or if you quickened a cantrip, it now meant that you were prevented from casting a normal spell as an action. Yeah. Because of chapter 1, not only just explaining how literally everything works in the game, but also having tons and tons of examples. It's just really, really great for just about anyone to read. The people that wrote this obviously understood education. They understood training principles. I would like to think that they took some of the tips that I have mentioned in my other in-depth reviews for other systems. Obviously, they didn't because nobody watches my stuff. But I'd like to think that they did. And yeah, it's such a really well-written chapter. Even other things that just didn't exist in the original Player's Handbook. Like, here's something that I don't think anyone even thought about, the fact that this was missing from the original Player's Handbook. The 6 abilities. All creatures, characters and monsters, have 6 abilities that measure physical and mental characteristics as shown on the ability description table. Ability descriptions. Ability strength. Score measures physical might. Dexterity, agility, reflexes, and balance. Constitution, health and stamina. Intelligence, reasoning and memory. Wisdom, perceptiveness and mental fortitude. Charisma, confidence, poise, and charm. They don't have this. In 10 years, they have not had a very simple place to figure out exactly what does strength mean. What does charisma mean? I know so many people that think if you lowball your charisma, you're ugly, and if you have high charisma, you're sexy. And that's the only thing that it can mean. Nothing in this description talks about physical good looks at all. It is confidence, poise, and charm. And as everyone does know, confidence is very, very sexy. But it blew my mind when I got to this section that this isn't something in the Player's Handbook. It just seemed foreign. And then I remembered D&D as a whole has always been marketed towards D&D players. And they expect other D&D players to do the work of finding new people and teaching them how to play. The Player's Handbook has never been meant for a new player to learn how to play the game. It has always been meant for an established player to be able to build their character. And this is the first step that they have ever taken to go, no, we probably should teach people how to play and explain what all this stuff is in our Player's Handbook. If we expect that to be the first book that people buy of our system, it probably should explain how the system works. And I love that. It's absolutely fantastic. They even have an explanation of the ability scores. Like 1, this is the lowest the score can normally go. If an effect reduces the score to 0, that effect explains what happens. 2 to 9, this represents a weak capability. 10 to 11, this represents the human average. 12 to 19, this represents a strong capability. 20, this is the highest an adventurer score can go unless a feature says otherwise. 21 to 29, this represents an extraordinary capability. 30, this is the highest the score can go. Again, this is all stuff that we all knew for the most part, but it was never written down anywhere in one succinct spot where everyone could look it up. It was just something that it was said here, or it's mentioned in this book, or it's this or that or that. But here we have this really easy, simple place to look for it. If you are making your own RPGs, this is a fantastic chapter to read over and look at how it works. And it'll give you a good idea of how to write this is how to play my game chapter. So yeah, it goes on and on and on. And again, the artwork, like a really, really great example. They talk about rules and crits and stuff like that. And so they give an example. There's this piece of art where you have basically what looks kind of like a comic book frame that's chopped into 3 different pieces. The upper left-hand quadrant thing, you have a d20 rolling a nat 20, and you can see this dwarven fighter kind of character just finished swinging, and he's basically cleaving a gelatinous cube in half. It looks really epic. On the right side, you see a tiefling bandaging a kobold and getting a 12 on their roll. And it's working. It's like, okay, that's how that works. And then the last one, you can see an adventurer that is holding what, I'm not sure, it looks maybe like an ice pick style dagger or a rondel maybe. And they are falling onto a bunch of pointy rocks or spikes, and you see a nat 1 there. This is such a great way to give a visual representation of what these mean in the world itself. And it's so good. And you just see this over and over and over in this. When I read through this, it made me so happy and got me so excited for the rest of the book that once I got to the rest of the book, again, it really feels like whoever worked on the first chapter didn't touch anything else in the rest of the book. And it shows massively. Another thing that they have in here, skill list. Again, it says acrobatics, the ability score is dexterity. Example uses, stay on your feet in a tricky situation or perform an acrobatic stunt. Insight, wisdom, discern a person's mood and intentions. Medicine, wisdom, diagnose an illness or determine what killed the recently slain. Arcana, intelligence, recall lore about spells, magic items, and the planes of existence. This, again, is something that doesn't exist in the player's handbook. But it's so perfect. I mean, yeah, they kind of tell you what the different things to do, but it's nowhere near as succinct or easy to understand as it is right here. And a lot of times, because there's never really been a really easy to understand, succinct example of what each skill does, people would argue, especially when 5th edition first came out, people would argue constantly about, well, no, I think this is a perception check. No, this is an investigation check. Well, no, this is more of a... And now we have very specific understanding of what all of this stuff is. So, yeah. Everything about this section is just really, really nice. They have an action section where it describes how every single action works. Another thing that in the 2014 Player's Handbook, they did have something like this, but instead of listing every single action that you can take with a short description of how everything works, they had an entire section of the chapter where it would go, these are the actions you can take. Attack. Here's like 17 pages on how attacking works. Dash. Here's like a half a page on how dash works. Disengage, here's a paragraph on that. And so it was very, very difficult to figure out exactly what you can do because it was spread out over like 30 pages of text. Here, single page, has everything there, and then you can go further in to find more specific things. And if you're doing this on D&D Beyond, every single thing, like every single action, has a tooltip associated with it. If you click on it, it will take you to where it is explained in more detail. So they give the overview of the actions. They talk about social interactions and all that stuff. And then they go through. And again, more examples of how things work. I mean, everything in here is just so really well written. With so many really, really great examples and simple to understand concepts that anyone can pick up this book and understand, oh, this is how you play Dungeons and Dragons, which I can't say about any other version of the D&D Player's Handbook. I just can't. It's not something that has been possible up until now. So, yeah, that's the first thing. Moving on. Chapter 2, Creating a Character. This is your standard, here's how you create a character. It's not an incredibly long chapter. And again, it works for exactly what it's supposed to be. There's a little how-to guide. It says, create your character. Step 1, choose a class. Step 2, determine origin. Step 3, determine ability scores. Step 4, choose an alignment. Step 5, fill in the details. So if you need something, especially if you're a new player, you're not quite sure what you want to be doing, you've never built a character before, having this, first of all, most tabletop RPGs will have something like this, and they don't need to be fancy. And that's exactly what this is. They'll have this little kind of checklist of this is what you do in each step, and this works absolutely perfectly for doing that. And then they explain each step a little bit more. This is where, like for step 1, choose a class, they list every single class. But instead of just going Barbarian, page blah blah, they have a couple different columns on this table. They have a column that says likes, they have a column that says primary ability, and then they have a column that says complexity. So, for the Barbarian, what do they like? Battle. What's their primary ability? Strength. What's their complexity? Average. Whereas the Fighter likes weapons. Primary ability, strength or dexterity. Complexity, low. Again, very, very nice way for a new player that's trying to figure out what they want to do, or even for a returning player that may not, like maybe you always play a Barbarian, that's all you've ever done, but you want to try something different. Going to this step 1, choose a class, and then looking over these specific things can be a nice way to kind of figure out what you want to play next. And and then they do that for every single. I'm going to try this one more time. They do that for every single thing. Determine origin. They have a bunch of different things that help you figure out how to do that. Determine ability scores. A bunch of different things help you do that. Choose an alignment. Fill in the details. Level advancement. Starting at higher levels. This is another thing that I find interesting. They had a starting at higher levels kind of thing in the PHP one. It wasn't really particularly great. However, they do have something kind of interesting. So for creating a higher level character, they actually have suggestions beyond just have a level 6 character. They have starting equipment at higher levels, where like one of the things, if you start a character at level 5 to 10, they should have, according to this, 500 gold points plus 1d10 times 25 gold points plus normal starting equipment, and they should probably have one common and one uncommon magic item. Whereas if you're starting a character somewhere between 17 and 20, they should start with 20,000 gold pieces plus 1d10 times 250 gold pieces plus normal starting equipment And they should have 2 common magic items, 4 uncommon magic items, 3 rare magic items, and 1 very rare magic item. So it gives you a much better idea of, well, if I want to start a campaign at a higher place, like all of my campaigns, for the most part, I like to start at either level 5 or level 6, to give the players plenty of ability to create interesting characters. So because of that, if I do this, I can go, oh, well, they should have that much money, and they should have 1 common magic item, 1 uncommon magic item. My rule of thumb thus far has always been, if I start you at 5th or 6th level, you get to have 1 common or uncommon magic item. And that's done pretty well for me. This just lets you have 1 of each. So yeah, and then they talk about multiclassing. Multiclassing before was an optional rule. Now it is default. They expect you to be multiclassing. And then, yeah, the final thing they have in here is they have a trinket table, which is, again, another thing that can be a lot of fun, to have some kind of random trinket for your character that's connected to their backstory in some way. There's no mechanical benefit to it, but it can be a lot of fun. So, anyway, that's that chapter. Moving on. Chapter 3. Character classes. This is going to be the longest part of the video because I am going to go over every single class and talk about the changes and other things that happened as part of the revision. So because of that, normally for my timestamps, I will do it chapter by chapter. For this one, I am going to have a separate timestamp for each different class. And then for this beginning thing, I'm going to give just an overall kind of my opinion of the new classes in general. It's a real mixed bag. There are some things that I find really interesting, like the new version of the Rogue, I think is just better than the base version of the Rogue. It is more interesting to play. It gives the character more choices to make during combat, and the best way to play your Rogue is no longer going to be shoot, get sneak attack, hide, rinse, repeat every single turn. Now with Cunning Strike, you actually get to be creative with your Rogue, and it turns it into a much more interesting class. The Warlock, on the other hand, I think is a significantly worse version. Mechanically, not a ton changes, but they change where when you choose choose your pact. They moved it from 1st level to 3rd level because all subclasses happen at 3rd level now. There's no variation between classes, and it makes Warlocks very, very weird. And I'll go into more detail when we get to that section. But yeah, they're 2 good examples of there's good stuff and bad stuff. The Ranger, for the most part, is the Tasha's version of the Ranger. So if you've been using that before, the Ranger's going to feel very, very similar. Even the subclasses are real close to what they are in the current game. So there's not going to be a whole lot of change. The Fighter, on the other hand, does get a few kind of bigger changes. So overall, there's good stuff, there's bad stuff. And I think that's the biggest problem with this book in general is there's no way, I don't know a single person that could just take this book and just use it as is. You have to take apart this book. So yeah, let's move on and start talking about the actual changes. So moving on. Let's talk about the Barbarian. Barbarian! One of the things about the Barbarian is, other than the champion fighter, Barbarian was probably the simplest class to play because there was really only 2 things that you needed to go. Me hit things with sharp or blunt object, and me rage. That's all you really needed to know. Playing a Barbarian was pretty simple, pretty easy, and the 2 Barbarian subclasses that they included with the Player's Handbook were both relatively simple to understand. The Berserker was slightly more complicated than the Totem Barbarian, mostly because dealing with exhaustion for their Frenzied Rage made things a little bit weird. But that was it. And I guess the totem barbarian could get a little bit confusing depending on which totems that you chose, but they generally weren't too bad. Now it's not. Again, they listed as average difficulty, or excuse me, they listed as average complexity, not low complexity like the fighter. And the two big reasons for that are the change to rage and the change and the removal of brutal critical, which really kind of encapsulates most of the changes to the Barbarian. Rage has always been a defining feature of the Barbarian ever since it was introduced, I think, in as a kit in 2nd edition. Basically, rage makes you harder to kill and makes you do more damage. That's always been how it works. And in core 5th edition, the way that your rage works is once you activate it as a bonus action, as long as you either make an attack roll or you take damage, your rage continues. Now, the way that you get your rage to continue is either you have to make an attack roll against an enemy, force an enemy to make a saving throw, or take a bonus action to extend your rage. So before, rage was effectively a passive thing. As long as you were taking damage, which if you were playing your Barbarian correctly, you were taking damage. You never had to worry about it going away. Now, there's no passive aspect to rage. It is an active thing. You have to choose and make choices to ensure that your rage continues. And if you ever get the incapacitated condition, your rage just ends, which I don't believe was a thing before. You had to specifically be rendered unconscious. But there's a lot of different things, like getting paralyzed gives you the incapacitated condition. So like hold person can turn off rage. Whereas before, incapacitation wouldn't turn off your rage unless you didn't take damage for an entire turn and also couldn't do something else. And that really kind of explains most of the changes to the Barbarian. The Barbarian used to be a very passive style class. Brutal Critical was another thing. You didn't get it until level 9, but it was very inherent to the Barbarian. It fit with the kind of playstyle. Brutal Critical was just when you when you got a critical hit, you rolled an additional die of damage. There was no choice to be made about it. You just got extra stuff. And that's kind of how the Barbarian used to play. That's not how it works any longer. Another thing that's a little bit different, rage damage used to be only on melee attacks, strength-based melee attacks. Now, anytime you make an attack using strength, including unarmed strikes, you get your rage to the damage. So you theoretically can make a ranged Barbarian that uses throwing weapons, where you really couldn't do that other than there was a specific subclass that was introduced real late in the Giant supplement that allowed you to make a throwing-based Barbarian. As we move forward, the weapon mastery stuff, I'm going to talk about weapon mastery when we get to the channel, or when we get to the chapter, the equipment chapter. Overall, I like the idea of weapon mastery, but only about half. There's 8 different mastery traits. 4 of them are always useful. 2 of them are useful in a couple different situations, and then 2 are just not good, and you really never want to use them. So because of that, the weapon mastery and how it works with barbarians, your mileage is going to vary, but every martial class is going to interact with the weapon mastery system. And as long as you're using one of the 4 really good ones, or you build your character around the 2 that are useful in certain situations, it's probably going to be a benefit for you. Everything else is really kind of common. Reckless attack is relatively common. The same. Reckless attack is the same as it used to be. Danger sense is mostly the same. Now it's just advantage on dexterity saving throws instead of dexterity saving throws against stuff you can see, which is kind of a theme for the 2024 revision in general. Is if they could simplify something, they did. This is the simple version of D&D 5th edition. And then the subclasses that they have in here: Berserker, Wildheart, which is basically the new version of the Totem Barbarian, Path of the World Tree, which is a nonsense interesting one. And by nonsense interesting, I mean it's really, really cool, but it really shouldn't be that cool. It's just one of those things like you have no right to be this interesting. And then Path of the Zealot is one that's existed already, and again, they're good. And then every so often you get these things like Primal Knowledge, where you just get things where you can use strength instead of the normal skill for things when your rage is active, like stealth. You can use your strength to stealth when you are raging. I love everything about this. I think it's amazing. So yeah, as you go mover further, you do they do remove a little bit of the hypermobility of the barbarian. It was basically barbarians and monks had about the same movement. Now barbarians still do get movement speed increase, but it's only 10 feet. And then it never gets any bigger. So they're not as fast as monks anymore, which I don't have a huge problem with that. But then we get to level 9 in Brutal Strike, which is what replaces Brutal Critical. Brutal Strike allows you to forego the advantage that you get from Reckless Attack on one strength-based attack roll, and then if you still hit, so you have to use Reckless Attack, you can ditch the advantage on a strength-based attack roll, and the attack can't have disadvantage. And if the attack hits, the target takes extra damage, and you get to add a Brutal Strike effect. The two that you get there are Forceful Blow or Hamstring Blow. You can probably figure out what both of those do. One of them pushes, one of them reduces speed. And this massively changes how you play your Barbarian, because this is not a passive effect. This is not something that just happens while you're already Barbarianing. This is an active choice that you have to make that requires you to understand what's going on, and this is part of the base Barbarian kit. Were all Barbarians head empty, me break things? No, there were quite a few different Barbarian subclasses that made you really have to think about how you wanted to play your character. But the base kit for the Barbarian was me hit thing with heavy. And now it's not. And I don't think that is a bad thing in any way, shape, or form, but it does definitely change the appeal of the class. For anyone that wanted kind of a mindless killing character, you're not going to be able to do that with this. And because both of the Brutal Strike options that you get here are control abilities, you either slow them or you move them, it's going to require Barbarian players to actually be thinking about more than, okay, what do I want to focus on next? And that's really, really fascinating. So, and then other stuff keeps going. But those are the really big changes that are going to be different. And I'm not going to go through subclasses or anything like that unless I want to acknowledge something really, really specific. Like, again, the Path of the World Tree. I don't know if I just missed this subclass or this actually is something that they created for D&D 5.5, which is what I'm going to refer to this for the rest, because the 2024 revision is a pain in the ass. It's 5.5. I don't know if they created Path of the World Tree specifically for 5.5, but it's cool. It's kind of it's a nature-based barbarian, so similar to the Wildheart, but it's a control-based barbarian, and it's nuts with the cool stuff that you can do. You can give out temporary hit points, you can teleport, you can wrap people up with magic vines. It's just massively cool. Of the 4 subclasses that exist for the Barbarian, if I'm playing the new flavor of Barbarian, I'm playing a World Tree Barbarian. Like, there's no question. It's such an interesting, unique take, and it definitely does not play like the 5.0 version of the Barbarian. You could not have a World Tree Barbarian without the changes that they made to the new, the 5.5 Barbarian. So, yeah. Moving on. Control Barbarian. Who would have thought? The next class, the Bard. Something I should mention. At the beginning of each section, they have this little table about the stuff that you get when you pick up the class. And then they have becoming a Bard. As a level 1 Bard, these are the things you get. As a multi-class Bard, these are the things you get. And some classes, they're very similar to what you get at level 1. And other classes, they're very, very different. And I find that really, really interesting. As far as the Bard itself, there's really not as big a change to the Bard that I'm I'll try this one more time. There's not as big a change to the Bard as there were with other things. Like the final playtest, they tried to really change how the Bard works to basically kind of force you into a support role, and they walked that back pretty heavily. So this, like, the Bard here plays very, very similarly to the 5.0 Bard. The 5.5 Bard is very, very similar until you get to the subclasses. The subclasses start changing pretty extensively. And then the other thing that is a pretty big change, magical secrets. Before... the way that magical secrets worked for the Bard is once you hit 10, you could actually just choose two spells from any spell list. And they count as Bard spells for you. And that made the Bard very, very versatile. But it was only 2 spells. And if you chose a College of Lore Bard, that would give you a few more spells from other spell lists. But the Bard spell list in and of itself is relatively limited on purpose. It's because of this magical secrets. The 5.5 version of Magical Secrets is now, whenever you reach a Bard level, including this level, and the prepared number of spells in the Bard feature table increases, you can choose any of your new prepared spells from the Bard, Cleric, Druid, and Wizard spell lists. And the chosen spells count as Bard spells for you. In addition, whenever you replace a spell prepared for this class, you can replace it with a spell from those lists. So basically, every time you level up, you can replace an earlier spell you had with a new spell, which was a Tasha's Cauldron of Everything optional rule for most spellcasting classes. Now it's just a regular rule. And now, basically, from level 10 on, Bards get access to every spell list except for Warlocks. That really does change how high-level Bards play. Because, again, the thing that made Bards one of the more interesting classes to play, other than the fact that their subclasses could change them massively, was the fact that Magical Secrets could allow spell combinations that shouldn't be able to happen. Combining Cleric spells with Wizard spells is a weird thing. And having them all use the same casting attribute was kind of weird. Or combining Druid spells and Wizard spells. Like, there was always kind of some weird stuff that you could do, and now they do that. Yeah. And then, I guess the other thing we should mention about, at level 19, every single class, instead of getting another feat, they get an epic boon. Which you can, if you don't like any of the epic boons, you can just choose another feat, just like normal, or you can get an epic boon. And we'll talk about the epic boons when we get to the feat section. There are a few that I think are really interesting. The vast majority of them are dumb. And they don't really feel like cool things that you can get at level 19. The only thing that's nice about it is instead of... It used to be epic boons are what you got at level 20. And it just made it feel really, really... It made you feel really stupid for investing 20 levels into a single class. And now... you get them at 19, and then each class has a capstone skill that you get at 20, either through your subclass or through your main class. So that in and of itself is nice, but they're still not great. And then the other thing that's interesting about the Player's Handbook in general, spell lists are in the character section, not in the spell section. So in the old player's handbook, when you opened up the spell chapter, at the very beginning, it would show every single spell list alphabetically and go, Bard, and it'd go cantrips, first level, second level, and it would just list the names, and then you'd have to kind of flip between them. But it did make comparing the different spell lists really, really easy. Now, each spell list is located next to the class itself in the class's chapter. I don't think this is a better or worse way to do it. It's just a different way to do it. And it does mean comparing different spell lists is more difficult because there's a lot more pages between them. And especially for the Bard, being able to choose, which spell you want to choose from which list is going to be more difficult because now you have to flip between 3 different pages or 3 different sections of the book to figure out which spells that you're getting. But yeah, so the subclasses themselves, they're weird. Things like the College of Dance, the 3rd level of ability basically gives you the ability to do unarmed strikes kind of like a monk, and then they never deal with that ever again. The rest of the class has everything, has completely different things like being able to use your reaction to move, or giving you effectively the evasion skill and stuff like that. Like it is the most awkwardly designed subclass I've ever seen. The rest of the subclasses are very, very similar to the subclasses that already exist, like the College of Glamour has already existed. I think that was a Xanathar's one. It was either Tasha's or Xanathar's. The College of Lore was in the original one. They no longer have, or they do have the College of Valor. It's not quite the same as the old College of Valor. It kind of combines a few different of the kind of sword bard style ones, and it's not bad in any way, shape, or form. Things like you get extra attack at 6th level, and part of that extra attack is you can cast one of your cantrips that has a casting time of an action in place of one of the attacks. So it gives you the ability to kind of mix martial abilities and spell casting, which you really need if you're going to be that kind of sword mage style character. But yeah, overall, the Bard didn't see a ton of changes aside from what should be a relatively minor thing in Magical Secrets that is actually a very major thing, but it's not a bad thing. It just kind of changes how it works. So, moving on. The Cleric. This is another one that just feels really, really weird because, again, Clerics used to choose their subclass at level 1, and now you don't get to choose it until level 3. But you do still get a choice at level 1 called Divine Order. And basically it's, do you want to be a punchy cleric? Or do you want to be a casty cleric? Because you choose either Protector or Thaumaturge. Protector gives you proficiency with martial weapons and heavy armor. Thaumaturge, you get an extra cantrip. And you get a bonus to Arcana and Religion checks equal to your Wisdom modifier, which you will see a lot of the spellcasting classes get something similar. But this is not that far off from how the Cleric used to be. Basically, when you chose your subclass, each subclass would specialize either in being a casting Cleric or in being a more martial style Cleric. Now, Cleric being a full caster, he was always going to be casting spells. But certain clerics like the War Domain, the Forge Domain, they were more focused on you being kind of up in front, going toe-to-toe. And then things like Life Domain, you were more expected to be in the back. So with the Divine Order, that's where you're going to be making that choice, is just choosing one of those roles. And that does mean that instead of your subclass kind of choosing where your character is going to be, this choice allows you to do that. So you theoretically could be a life cleric that is a front lines life cleric that's just sitting there going, heal. Like, that's something that you can do, which theoretically, yeah, you could kind of do that with a life cleric before. They weren't really made for that. And now you can. Channel Divinity works the exact same way as it has before, though they do... It's not quite as nice. They have this thing called Divine Spark. And this is another one of those things where it feels like different people worked on different parts of the book, and they never talk to each other. Divine Spark basically is a magic action. You choose a creature within a certain distance, roll a d8, add your wisdom. Either it restores hit points if you like them, or they take damage. It's perfectly fine. And then as your level gets higher, you can add additional d8s. However, you only get two uses of your Channel Divinity per day. Okay, limited uses, that's perfectly fine. A level 1 Cure Wounds restores 2d8 plus your spellcasting ability modifier. And you can cast that at level 1, I think 4 times. It's either 3 or 4 times. Channel Divinity, which is a level 2 ability, you roll a single d8 and add your wisdom modifier. And you can only use it twice a day. Healing, and it takes your standard action. It takes your action to do that. Healing has not been very useful in in 5th edition since its inception. And so the way that they decided to fix that was they just doubled all the healing, and then they forgot to do it here. I mean, yeah, maybe the fact that there's no attack roll or anything like this. You just pick a target, you roll a d8, and they either take damage, or they either get healed or they take damage. They do get a save for it, so it's not like it's like instant damage. And if they really wanted to, they could. Well, if you heal, it's 2d8. If you do damage, it's only 1 d8. But it's a perfect example of it. It feels like different people wrote different parts of the book and they just didn't speak to each other, because Divine Spark seems like a completely pointless use of your Channel Divinity, especially since your subclass is also going to give you a Channel Divinity that generally is going to be more useful than this. There's almost no situation where Divine Spark is going to be useful unless you've used all of your healing spells and you desperately need to bring someone back up from 0 hit points. It's just not useful. And it doesn't get useful the farther on. And doing a single d8 of damage on a save, you can get the same amount of damage out of a cantrip. And the cantrip doesn't have limited uses. You can get more damage out of some cantrips, depending on the cantrip that you're using. So everything about that ability, and again, this is a commentary on this as a whole. There are certain things you're like, this is a really cool idea. The Divine Order, you can be a Protector or a Thaumaturge. You no longer have to rely on your subclass to figure out which flavor of Cleric you are. You get to make that decision. That's a good idea. Divine Spark is a bad idea that seems to completely ignore the good changes that they made to the healing system. There is never a situation where it's going to be in your best interest to use your Channel Divinity instead of either casting a spell or using a cantrip. It's just a bad ability. And then they still have Turn Undead. The 4 subclasses, Life, Light, Trickery, War, none of them are massive changes. They play for the most part the same way that they have for 10 years. And the Cleric itself is not that different. At 7, you get Blessed Strikes, which again used to be locked behind a subclass. Now you get to choose, and that's Divine Strike. Whenever you hit with a weapon, it does extra damage. Potent Spellcasting, add your Wisdom modifier to the damage you deal with any Cleric cantrip. So you want to be a casty, you take Potent Spellcasting. If you want to be a smacky, you use Divine Strike. Again, this is a good thing. This means that clerics can be significantly more varied. And if you want to play a trickery domain cleric that is up close and personal all the time, you can. Or if you want to play a trickery domain cleric that is always in the back and is always kind of moving around and switching places with their duplicity and things like that and always trying to cause chaos, you can. That is a wonderful addition to this. But then they do other stupid things like Divine Spark. And you go, really? Did you guys learn nothing in 10 years? The rest of this, Divine Intervention is kind of an interesting thing. It's always been a part of this, and it works basically the same way that things has worked. However, the capstone ability of the Cleric is called Greater Divine Intervention. And this is the thing that's interesting. When you use Divine Intervention feature, you can choose Wish when you select a spell. If you do so, you can't use Divine Intervention again until you finish 2d4 long rests. That's crazy. Clerics can wish now. That's a nonsense thing. But it's a 20th level ability, so yeah, go for it. And yeah, like I said, the subclasses themselves, to my knowledge, I read through them a couple of times. They work for the most part the same way that these subclasses have worked for a long time. The only difference is the old flavor of Cleric in the 5.0 PHB just had more options because the Cleric and the Wizard had like 77 different subclasses. And now in 5.5, everybody gets 4. And I don't think that's a bad thing. All of them have a different way to play the Cleric. All of them work. So, moving on. The next class, the Druid. The Druid is interesting because Druids were one of the classes that used to piss off some dungeon masters. And min-maxers loved them, specifically the Circle of the Moon Druid. Because effectively, your battle wild shape forms just gave you so much additional hit points that high-level Moon Druids were nearly impossible to kill. They just would continue to wild shape and just get these huge, massive hit point pools, and it was a problem. I'm not saying that it wasn't. It's not nearly as big a problem as some people made it out to be, but it was a problem. So they did make some changes to the Druid themselves. First things first, spellcasting works the same way that it has for the Druid for the most part. However, again, because the Druid... originally, Druids got their subclass at level 2. Now they're not going to get it till level 3. They do give you a choice at level 1 that kind of changes how you play your character. You have 2 different flavors of Druid. You have the Magician Druid, gets you an extra cantrip, and it gets you a bonus to Arcana and Nature checks equal to your Wisdom, because that's used for spell casting. Or you can do Warden, which gets you proficiency with martial weapons and training with medium armor, which is not something that has really been considered for Druids for a while now. Druids have been full casters for 5th edition the entire time. And because so many people went Moon Druid, they really didn't care about the weapons you wielded because they would turn into claws. And then when you were playing a caster druid, you were that. You were a caster druid. You stayed back. Giving the ability to create more martial style druids is an interesting way to do this. And it can do things like Flame Blade has not really been an incredibly useful spell for druids, despite the fact that being an iconic druid spell, because they just really weren't built to be able to deal a ton of damage with melee attacks. They were casters, or when they were doing melee, they were doing them as animals. So now if you go with a Warden, being able to use medium armor They already have the ability to use shields. You can have a little bit beefier druid that doesn't have to invest in their dexterity score to have a decent AC, and they can do more kind of martial stuff. So that in and of itself is cool. And then we get to Wild Shape, and Wild Shape is the biggest change. Still works kind of the same way. It's a bonus action. However, instead of just choose something to turn into, you have a number of known forms. Basically, when you become a druid, you have to pick 4 animal shapes that you can turn into, a la Animorphs. This was another thing that became really, really annoying for the Dungeon Masters. Is anytime something introduced new beast type monsters, druids would look at it and go, look, I have new things that I can do. And this is basically going, no, you're going to have to pick specific forms. You can't just randomly change into anything that you want. Which I am perfectly fine with. You do get more forms as you level up, so it's not like you choose four forms when you are at level 1 and then you never get any more. No, you get more forms regularly. But it does allow you to do that. You also get more uses of Wild Shape. In 5.0, you got 2 uses until you get to level 20, and then you got all the uses. Now you get additional uses as you level up. I think maximum you get 4. The other kind of limitations, like you can't have a fly speed on any of your forms until you get to level 8. Stuff like that's normal. The other thing that's different is instead of gaining the hit points of the form you turn into, you get a number of temporary hit points equal to your druid level. But you keep your druid hit points. So now, druids are no longer these super invincible characters that just get to transform repeatedly, especially really high level ones, and just keep getting massive amounts of hit points. Now, they don't get knocked out of their form when their hit points return to 0. They get to stay in the form until they're either rendered unconscious, or they decide the time runs out, or they decide to end it as a bonus action. But there's no longer this thing of, well, I can just use my bonus action to get 120 more hit points when I turn into a T-Rex. It's not a thing that happens anymore, which I think is significantly better. And they explain a little bit more about what parts of the beast stat block you get to use and what ones you don't. So it's not that big a deal. The other thing that's kind of interesting is they already start introducing other ways that you can use your Wild Shape ability. Level 2, you get what's called Wild Companion. As a magic action, you could expend a spell slot or a use of Wild Shape to cast the Find Familiar spell. So bringing back the old aspect of druids having an animal companion is now something you can do. And if you are a more casting style druid and you really don't use your Wild Shape that much, well, now you have an alternate use for it. And most of the subclasses will have alternate uses for your Wild Shape as well, which is not a new thing. Other than in the core 5.0 Player's Handbook, every time they introduce new druid subclasses, I think almost every one give you a different way to use your limited wild shapes. And because, again, they get more wild shapes, that means that this new version of the druid is less powerful than the old one, if you're doing that Circle of the Moon version. But other than that, you have more choices that you can make, and it's just overall, it's just a better balanced class. It's not, super nerfed or anything. They got rid of one thing that was abused by most players, and then they gave you a bunch of other options to kind of make up for the fact that, hey, you were abusing this before. It really wasn't fun for anyone that wasn't a druid, so we're going to take that away, but we're going to give you a bunch of other stuff that isn't abusable, that'll still give you cool stuff to play around with. And then other things, like at level 7 you get Elemental Fury, which basically, if you're spellcasting, you can add your Wisdom modifier to the damage you deal with a Druid cantrip. That's cool. But you also can get Primal Strike, which once on each of your turns you hit a creature with an attack roll using a weapon or a beast form's attack in wild shape, you can cause the target to take extra damage of a particular choice, a particular type chosen when you hit. That's a really big deal. That massively changes how you play the character. And again, it incentivized melee-based druids. That really hasn't been a thing before, and now they're finding a way to incentivize and reward a melee-based druid. And you eventually get an improved version of those things as well. Yeah, I mean, overall, like, the druid itself is a significantly more interesting flavor of the druid. The only thing that they didn't do is you still cannot play the druid from the Dungeons and Dragons movie, where they could just continually just keep switching between animal forms. It's still not a thing that you can do. I think it would have been cool for them to find a way to do that, but you just can't. Yeah, and then, like I said, the subclasses, Circle of the Land, which is your basic spellcasting druid. It works very, very similar to how it already works. Circle of the Moon, again, it very, very similar to how things work. One thing they did to take away, you no longer can turn into elementals, I don't believe. I'm just looking before I say the wrong thing. Yeah, they becoming elementals is a really, really cool thing you could do as a moon druid. You can't do that anymore. They do have a thing called lunar form. It's not elementals, but it does kind of improve your wild shaping ability. And that's what Circle of the Moon is. It's all about giving you more options for using your wild shape, which again is perfectly fine. The elemental forms, again, were super cool. They were kind of broken. This just allows you to still do cool things without having a broken thing. Circle of the Sea is one that, again, I don't remember it, but I might just be not recognizing it. And Circle of the Stars is one that came out. I want to say it was Tasha's one. It was either Tasha or Xanathar's. All of them work very similar to how they worked before. So, moving on. The Fighter! Fighters are not massively different than they were before. Fighters already got their subclass at 3rd level, so that's not really a big change. Weapon mastery. At one point, I remember in one of the playtest documents, they had a thing where fighters actually had the ability to take weapon mastery features from other weapons and use them on weapons that didn't have that feature. That's not really here. They have something similar to that, but it's a much more limited version of that. And your second wind has become, instead of just something that was kind of cool, it becomes a defining feature because there are things built into the class that actually upgrade it and give you different things that you can do with it, which I find really interesting. The fighter does get more weapon mastery properties than any other classes, where they have mastery properties of 3 kinds of weapons. But as with every other character that gets weapon mastery, you can change one of your weapon masteries at the end of every long rest. So limiting you to 3 or 2 or whatever is kind of pointless. It's a limitation that's not limiting, because for the most part, you're probably only going to have 1 or 2 weapons that you use on a regular basis anyways. So the fact that you can't use every single weapon mastery property at the exact same time doesn't matter. You would never have that ability to do that anyways. So this is one of those things where they put this limitation on there and it doesn't really need to be there. Let the fighter use every weapon mastery property. It's not going to change anything. There's still limitations to how many weapons you can use at any given time. There's still limitations on drawing weapons and actions that you have to use to do that, and stowing weapons and things like that. So it's not like giving them the ability to use every weapon mastery is going to somehow break it, or even requiring you to choose which weapon masteries you can use. It's complexity for the sake of complexity, but in actual practical use, it's never going to change anything. You're always going to choose the weapon mastery properties of the weapons that you like, and those are the only weapons you're going to do. There's never going to be a situation where you're sitting there going, oh man, I really wish I could use this weapon, but I don't have the weapon mastery for it. Darn. It's not going to happen. So that I find stupid. It's not that it's a bad thing or anything. It is a limitation that doesn't limit anything. So it's just busy work. Action Surge has had a major change. It used to be Action Surge, you get another action. Now, Action Surge, on your turn, you take one additional action except the magic action. And this was something that min-maxers would use a lot to get around that bonus action magic rule in D&D 5.0. Now, because they've changed it to you can just only cast one leveled spell per turn, they didn't technically need to do this, but it still does prevent, double casting cantrips or things like that, which could become really, really bad. So with or technically triple casting, if you also had a meta magic in there, you could quicken a cantrip, cast it as a spell, and then use Action Surge to catch it the third time. And I may or may not have a character that I built around that idea. But with Action Surge, how it is now, it is only useful for martial classes. So the min-maxers that used to make a wizard and take a 2-level dip in fighter, or start as a fighter so they could have heavy armor and Action Surge and then just do all this, that's not going to work anymore. But for how it was designed to use, it's still going to work the exact same way that it worked before. However, combining Action Surge with the new Nick weapon mastery, because you get an additional action, will be another thing that will have to be ruled upon, because Nick allows you to do the additional attack that you get from 2-weapon fighting as part of the attack action. And if you can take multiple attack actions, does that mean now that you can do multiple Nicks, which would mean dual wielding as a fighter is now really, really useful. So yeah, it's something I'm going to have to do some research on and try and figure out exactly what the ruling is going to be until we get an official ruling from them. But yeah. And then right at level 2, you get your first thing of, well, we're going to give you different things that you can use your second wind for. Tactical Mind, basically, you fail an ability check, you can burn a second wind to add a d10 to the skill, the ability check. So again, this version of the fighter, as much as they say that this fighter is low complexity, just the fact that now you have a choice between, is it more useful for me to be able to regain hit points, or do I really want to be able to make this check? And if the check still fails, the use of second wind isn't expended. That's a really, really useful thing. So yeah, Fighter's getting a little bit more interesting, even as part of its base kit. Fighter subclasses: Battlemaster, Champion, Eldritch Knight, Psy Warrior. For the most part, they work the way that they have for a while. There's not a whole lot of changes to them. But as the base class levels up, you get things like Tactical Shift. When you use your second wind with a bonus action, you can move half your speed without provoking opportunity attacks. And then 9, you get Tactical Mastery, which basically allows you to replace, when you attack with a weapon that has a weapon mastery you can use, you can replace that property with one of 3 other mostly useless properties of slow, sap, and push. Push is useful. Sap and slow really aren't. They're two of the ones that just aren't really worth anything. And yeah, so for the rest of it, yeah, it's a fighter, but it's a slightly more tactical fighter because of the combination of weapon masteries and the fact that they gave you a bunch of new things that you can use your second wind for, which is cool, and I like that, and I think it's very, very interesting. And then, like I said, the subclasses really haven't changed that much. Yeah, so yeah, moving on. Let's talk about the best class ever, the monk. As much as, yeah, they did make some decent changes to the monk, things like your monk weapons are now simple melee weapons and martial melee weapons that have the light property. So there are more martial melee weapons than there used to be. It doesn't really change a ton. The unarmed strike starts as a D6 instead of a D4, and they go up to a D12. So monks will be doing a little bit more damage. And then the monks focus and the focus points, they did give you flurry of blows, patient defense, and step of the wind. Effectively, there are versions of that that don't use focus points, and then you can kind of improve them with focus points. But for the most part, it still works the same way it has for a while. They do add a new thing called Uncanny Metabolism, which is basically once per long rest, you can get your focus points back, which I can see low-level monks using this all the time. And higher-level monks, maybe not, because a lot of the stuff that they have you doing now just uses less focus points than key points used to be used. And so it's still going to be useful no matter what level you are, because you get all of your focus points back. So it's not like it's a bad thing. It's just not the most... when you have more focus points, you're just not going to be running through them as fast. The other thing that's a kind of a change is this deflective attack thing. It used to be you could catch missiles, and that was really all you can do. Deflect attack allows you to do basically the same thing with any kind of attack that basically does physical damage. Eventually they upgrade it to just about any kind of attack, which is nice. It's useful. Again, I took the defensive duelist feat because my monk was just getting hit too often by melee attacks, and there was nothing I could do to stop it. So deflect attack basically can replace that. And again, I mentioned before, they improved the defensive duelist, so it's still useful. But maybe not for a monk as much, because deflect attack does have a lot of really useful things you can use it for. The four subclasses they have in here: Mercy, Shadow, Elements, and Open Hand. Mercy and Shadow. Mercy hasn't changed almost at all. Shadow, they made a few changes that I'll talk about. The Elements monk is the one that is the absolute most changed, and it needed it. The way the four Elements monk from 5.0 sucked. And now, instead of trying to turn the monk into a partial spellcaster, they just give you cool abilities that you can do that are elemental in nature, and I like that. And then Warrior, the Open Hand, had the most changes because of how they changed how unarmed strikes work. A lot of the things that you can do with unarmed strikes now used to be something that Warriors of the Open Hand, or Way of the Open Hand is what it used to be, could do. And now that they took that away from Open Hand monks, they had to kind of change how the Open Hand monks... And I think it's probably the weakest of the subclasses going forward now. Just because, again, the things that made it unique, they kind of took away from it. And then they had to try and give it other things to make it unique, and I just don't think it went super well. It's still a perfectly fine subclass, but before I could have seen myself making an open hand monk, and now I'm like, no, not doing it. The rest of it, for the most part, everything works the same way. Again, Stunning Strike, they change. You can only do it once per turn. And it ends at the start of your next turn instead of the end of your next turn, which does kind of change how things work for it, but it's not the biggest deal. And on a successful save, they still get their speed halved. So it's no longer, if you use Stunning Strike and they make their save, it's just wasted key points. Now, it's going to have some effect on them. It's just the failed save is significantly better for you. And the rest of it, for the most part, is the same as it has been for a while. Heightened Focus basically improves Flurry of Blows, Patient Defenses, Step of the Wind, which is nice. But the rest of it is, for the most part, the same. Deflect Energy, you get at level 13, basically means that you can now block any attack that hits you, which is nice. And yeah, overall, one of these days I might do like a really big, like in-depth deep dive on the new flavor of monk, because I don't think it's bad in any way, shape, or form. I'm not particularly fond of one of the changes they made to Warrior of Shadow, because they took away the silent spell, Pass Without a Trace, and the darkness or dark vision spell. And those were all really, really useful things that I used constantly on my Shadow Monk, and I think it makes the Shadow Monk significantly less useful. But they did give a bunch of other things that make it more interesting. But for the role that I used it for, my 5.0 Shadow Monk would not be able to fill that role. But other than that, the Monk is fine. I like most of the changes. It didn't really change it from the action economy controller that it was before. It's a little bit more offense focused than it was before, which is going to make most people happy with it, because the biggest complaint of the Monk is that it didn't do as much damage as a fighter. The one problem with the Monk is the thing that was supposed to make martial classes more interesting, the weapon mastery, the Monk can't use, because the majority of their attacks need to be unarmed strikes. So that in and of itself is a kind of annoying, but worse things have happened. So yeah. Moving on. All right. The Paladin. The Paladin is another one that has some pretty massive changes that change how the character plays. And I think the Paladin in and of itself is a worse version. I think the 5.0 Paladin is just better in almost every aspect. As far as the things that change, Lay on Hands has worked the same way since they introduced it. And the spell casting is basically the same as well. Weapon Mastery, again, works the same way. Fighting style, they do give you the option of the Blessed Warrior fighting style, which is exclusive to the Paladin, which basically gives you Cleric cantrips, which again is interesting, but with how weapon focused the Paladin is, Blessed Warrior is a bit of a hard sell. And then we get to Paladin Smite. And this is probably the biggest problem I had with any of the class changes that have happened, is Paladin Smite. A lot of people complained about Divine Smite for the 5.0 Paladin because burst damage wise, it was unparalleled. A Paladin could out damage anyone other than a Berserker Barbarian under a Frenzy Rage. And that really only happened at high levels. Low-level Paladins could outdamage literally every other martial class by a large amount. However, in order to do that, they had to use up all their spells, which, due to the fact that there weren't that many useful spells for Paladins to use, was not that big a deal. And so a lot of people complained, and so they decided to change how the Paladin Smite works. Now, the way that Divine Smite works is Divine Smite is a spell, and it costs a bonus action. So now you can only use Smite once per turn, and it requires you to not only take the attack action in order to make an attack, you can't cast Divine Smite until you hit with an attack, and it will burn your bonus action to do that. And as I've mentioned before, 5.5 actually gives a lot more uses for your bonus actions. There's a few different feats that give you ways to use your bonus action. A lot of the classes or subclasses will give you a cool way to use your bonus action. Bonus actions are more useful in 5.5 than they were in 5.0, and they were useful in 5.0. So forcing a Paladin to basically consume two different actions in order to use a defining feature of the class just sucks. It's not fun in any way, shape, or form, and it puts the Paladin at a disadvantage every single time. There isn't a situation where using your bonus action in order to get a little bit of extra damage when you've already had to use your action to get an attack is going to be beneficial for you. It's just not. It is a really, really bad solution. Now, they did change. There's always been Smite spells, and the way they used to work is you would use your bonus action to basically imbue the weapon you have with the Smite spell, and then the next time you hit something, the Smite spell would go off. However, they were concentration. So if you had anything like Crusader's Manual, which was really, really mantle. Crusader's Mantle, which was really, really nice. It gave you and basically anyone within an aura extra damage on every attack you made. And then if you wanted to use a Smite spell, you had to drop that. It was just really, really bad. The vast majority of Smite spells now do not use concentration. There's one Smite spell that uses concentration, and I think that's because while it continues affecting the enemy, they can't turn invisible. I don't know why stopping them from turning invisible forces it to have concentration, whereas literally every other Smite spell, including a bunch of Smite spells that have effects that linger on for a minute, don't require concentration, but whatever. That's what they decided to do. So that in and of itself, very, very cool. I'm perfectly fine with using a bonus action to get additional effects on top of a Smite. That is an interesting thing, and it gives you interesting ways to use your spellcasting. I'm not a fan of just every Smite in the world all having to use your bonus action. And again, the way it used to work before is you would use the bonus action, and then just the next time you hit something, it would work, which is why it made sense to use a bonus action. Now you can't cast the spell until you hit something. It's a really bad thing, and it kind of breaks the class. Because they didn't give you any new spells that might give you another use for your spells other than Divine Smite. Your best choice used to be to use Divine Smite, and now it isn't. It also means dual-wielding Paladins just aren't a thing. Unless you're using the new Nick property, and then you can Smite and still get your extra attack. So I guess that makes it slightly better, but I built a dual longsword wielding Paladin. It was a really cool character, and now that character simply can't exist. And the only way you can create a dual wielding Paladin that actually gets a benefit out of the dual wielding is you have to use paired scimitars. Or at least one of them has to be a scimitar. Your other one can be any light weapon. But you have to have at least one scimitar or a dagger, because those are the two light weapons that have the nick property. Again, this idea of we want to make martial classes more interesting to play. The most interesting martial class they nerf, and then they create this thing that's really, really, really useful, and then basically force you to use it if you want to create an interesting character there. And I just, it annoys the hell out of me. Channel Divinity, again, works the same way it has before. The subclasses they have are Devotion, Glory, Ancients, and Vengeance. And for the most part, they work the same way that they have for 10 years. I think Glory is a little bit newer, but Ancients, Devotion, and Vengeance were in the original 5.0 Player's Handbook. And then everything else here, you still get your Aura Protection. One thing they did add is they have a new term for area of effects. They have what's called an emanation, which is basically any ability that's centered on you is now an emanation instead of a 3-foot radius, or, you know, a 5-foot radius starting from you. Now it's an emanation. It's just a term change. It doesn't really change anything mechanically, but it does make things slightly easier to understand. So you will see the word emanation everywhere in the Paladin because of their auras and stuff like that. But for the most part, everything else about how the Paladin works hasn't really changed that much. There aren't any, you know, amazing new spells other than the fact that your smite spells are now actually, because they fucked up Divine Smite, the rest of the smite spells are good by comparison now, and you might actually want to try using the other ones because Divine Smite just really isn't a good use anymore. And then, yeah, like I said, the subclasses are the subclasses. They haven't changed. So, yeah, moving on. Let's talk about the Ranger. The Ranger is Tasha's Ranger. Like, aside from some minor changes to a few features, and by minor I mean they changed the wording on how they work, but mechanically this is almost identical to the optional changes introduced in Tasha for the Ranger, which isn't a bad thing. The one thing that pisses me off about the Ranger, for favorite enemy, we've talked about this, I've made videos about this, the idea that favorite enemy has been an aspect of the Ranger since its inception. It is an essential part of playing a Ranger, is the fact that they're really, really good at hunting certain kind of creatures. And in 5th edition, they've just really struggled trying to find a way to give you favorite enemy without kind of breaking the game. So now, what is favorite enemy? You always have the Hunter's Mark spell prepared, and you can cast it twice without expending a spell slot. So you get free Hunter's Mark, but it's still a fucking concentration spell. And this is, I'm going to tell you this right now. I'm going to tell my players when I run my next game, because one of my players is a Ranger, is actually a Barbarian Ranger, because that's a thing. Hunter's Mark no longer costs concentration for Rangers. That is the ruling I am making. It's not in here. They still force Rangers to concentrate on it, which really sucks because there's a lot of really cool abilities that Rangers have and really cool spells that Rangers have that they can't use if they want to use Hunter's Mark. And Hunter's Mark is now a defining feature of the class, as in it gets upgraded in the base class. You get more useful aspects of it as you level up. And there are subclasses that interact specifically with Hunter's Mark. So it is no longer a spell that you might use or you might not use. It is intrinsic to the Ranger. Just make it a non-concentration spell. I don't understand why they have this hang up of Hunter's Mark has to be concentration. It's not that powerful. Yes, Quick Quiver, the 5.0 version of it, plus Hunter's Mark probably would have been very, very broken, because at that point you're getting 5 attacks per round. They have a new version of Quick Quiver. It's not quite as broken, and even with Hunter's Mark, it's not that big a deal. And again, martial characters already kind of suck. So let's just give them this one thing. Other than that, it's the Tasha's version of the Ranger. It was fun 6 years ago? It was a fun version of the Ranger 6 years ago. It's a fun version of the Ranger now. There's really not that much to say about it. It's cool. If you want to play a Ranger, then do it. It's fun. The 5.0 PHB version of the Ranger was not bad. It was just not good. And if you really like, I played a Hunter Ranger in Ravenloft. I played a Hunter Ranger and had an absolute blast. And it was a dual wielding Hunter Ranger, a dual whip wielding Hunter Ranger. It was the worst choices you could make, according to, all of the min-maxers and everything. And it did crazy great damage. It was a fantastic character. I loved playing him. So it wasn't that the Ranger itself was absolutely horrible and disgusting. The Beastmaster Ranger sucked, but the Hunter was okay. And then when Tasha's came around, Ranger was good. The subclasses, they do make some changes to the subclasses. Like the Beastmaster is effectively the Tasha's version of the Beastmaster, which was just the better version of the Beastmaster. So that one, for the most part, is exactly this. This is the same. When you start getting like the Fey Wanderer, is a little bit different. The Gloomstalker, there's some slight changes to the Gloomstalker. They're not massive, but they are a little bit different to kind of work with how the Ranger has changed slightly. And then the Hunter itself, again, some slight changes to how things are. Things like the choice between Colossus Slayer and Hordebreaker is now you can change it anytime you take a short or long rest. Which is great! Almost everybody I know took Colossus Slayer because Hordebreaker was so situational that 9 times out of 10 you were never going to use it. And now it just takes a short rest. So you know you're going to be going up against a Horde. Take Hordebreaker. And then for the rest of the time, you will probably be using Colossus Slayer. So, I mean, yeah, everything else works for the most part. Yeah, it's a Ranger. It's fun. The Ranger has been fun since Tasha's. It was technically fun in the PHP. It just took a lot of understanding of the system to make it fun. I like it. Other than the fucking Hunter's Mark concentration. And again, I am making my own ruling. I encourage you to do this as well. Hunters are allowed to use Hunter's Mark without concentration. Vengeance Paladins, anyone that gets it through like Fey Touched, they still have to concentrate on the spell. I'm perfectly fine with that. Just let Hunters do it without concentration. Since it's an intrinsic part of the class, since subclasses interact with it, just let them do it without concentration. I don't understand this hang up on we can't let Hunter's Mark do bad things. Meanwhile, the Hex spell has been breaking the game massively for forever. But not Hunter's Mark. Can't let that happen. God, it's so stupid. Moving on. Let's talk about the Rogue. I say this over and over and over again about the 5th edition Rogue. The 5.0 version of the 5th edition Rogue is this close to being broken. There are so many things that it does so well that it just, again, running D&D Adventure League stuff for as long as I did, whenever I'd have a Rogue in the party, it'd be one of those things, it's this close. You are this close, dude. You try and like game the system and it's going to come down on you harder than a ton of bricks. It's this close. The new version of the Rogue is still this close to being broken, but it's better. Like there really isn't another way to describe it. It's a better version of the Rogue. And the reason why, so cunning action used to be a defining feature of the Rogue. And when I say defining feature, it was something that the subclasses interacted with. Every subclass would give you a new different way to use cunning action, and it was upgraded throughout the class. It was a really intrinsic part of the Rogue, and it meant that the Rogue itself was very bonus action reliant. It was one of the reasons why you really didn't see many dual wielding rogues, because they needed their bonus action for their cunning action. They had to. It was so intrinsic to the Rogue. Well, a lot of the things that are built into cunning action have now been given to a bunch of different classes, so it's now no longer a unique thing to the rogue. There's quite a few different classes that can dash as a bonus action. There's quite a few different classes that can disengage as a bonus action. Really, the hide thing is the only thing that is unique to the rogue anymore, and it was never that useful. The dash and disengage were always more useful than the hide, despite the fact that everyone fixated on hide so much. Now, cunning action still exists, but once you get it, it's never mentioned again in the class at all. They really don't care about cunning action because they've really gutted the specialness of it. And normally I would be very upset about that because it was a defining feature of the rogue. But oh boy, did they create a more interesting rogue in Sneak Attack. Sneak Attack in 5.0 is boring as shit. You just get to add more damage, lots of fun, more damage. Roll just pick up a handful of d6s and throw them on the table. That's how Sneak Attack works. It's not how it works anymore. You still can play the rogue that way. There's nothing stopping you from playing the rogue that way. However, when you get to 5th level, you get what's called Cunning Strike. And basically the way Cunning Strike works is you can sacrifice a number of dice to add additional effects to your sneak attack. One of them is called Poison. Basically, as part of the sneak attack, you force them to make a con save. If they fail it, they're poisoned for a minute. That is really cool! There's another one, Trip. You sacrifice a damage die, you can knock them prone. Withdraw. You sacrifice a damage die, you can move immediately after the attack, you can move up to half your speed without provoking an opportunity attack. Without using your bonus action. It's just part of the attack. This makes the rogue so interesting to play. Again, before, this is how you played your rogue. If you weren't hidden at the beginning of your turn, bonus action hide. If you were, you picked a target, made your attack, got your sneak attack. Just make sure that you're going to get your sneak attack. Bonus action hide, if you still had your bonus action, end your turn. That was how every single turn went with a rogue. They were boring as fuck. They were very, very useful, but every single combat was the exact same. With Cunning Strike, all of that changes. And as you level up, you get more Cunning Strike options. They're really, really interesting and fascinating, and it makes the rogue actually interesting. Something else that's interesting, at 3rd level, you get Steady Aim. It's a bonus action. You give yourself advantage on your next attack roll on the current turn. You can use this feature only if you haven't moved during this turn, and after you use it, your speed is 0 till the end of your current turn. Steady Aim is another thing that becomes a defining feature of the rogue because it gets upgraded and it gets interacted with, specifically the Thief subclass gets some really interesting changes to Steady Aim. So now, it was one of the things that I used to hate so much about rogues is there was this thing that I called the peekaboo rogue. And basically what it was you'd choose a halfling rogue because halfling rogues, I can't remember which flavor of halfling. One of the flavors of halflings could actually take the hide action if they were obscured by a medium creature. So this is how it worked. Halfling rogue with a crossbow. They would have someone go up to the bad guy and be in melee range. They would go right behind that person, so they are 10 feet away from the bad guy. Bonus action hide, and then they would take the shot, and they would go, well, because I'm hidden, then I get advantage on the attack roll. And they would basically use this to always have advantage on every attack roll that they rolled. They called it the peekaboo because basically they would just come out and go, peekaboo, shoot you in the face. And I would shut that down so quickly because that's not what the rules say about getting advantage on attack rolls. You only got advantage on attack rolls if the enemy, if you're attacking the enemy from a place that they didn't expect it. And that's specifically stated in there. 2-year-olds have object permanence, meaning just because they can't see something, they don't believe that it stops existing. It's something that's really fascinating that I think a lot of people don't understand about early childhood development. Object permanence develops somewhere around your second year of life. Somewhere in there, babies learn what's called object permanence, which means when they're not looking at something, they don't assume it stops existing. What that means is up until that point, if they can't see it, it doesn't exist to them. And so the game of peekaboo, you are literally erasing yourself from existence and then appearing in front of them because they identify their parents with their face. So once the face is gone, you no longer exist in their mind. That is fascinating. But getting back to this, babies have object permanence. So of course, someone whose life depends on them being able to defend themselves is not going to be surprised more than once from a short person jumping out and shooting them. They're going to expect you to shoot them. So it always annoyed the hell out of me how rogues would be, I need advantage. No, you don't. First of all, you don't need advantage to get your sneak attack, and that's what you need. Second of all, there are so many different ways to get advantage on attack rolls. Hell, flanking gives you advantage on attack rolls. You don't need to do this. You are just trying to exploit a rule for no reason, and you really don't need... It's not that hard to hit as a rogue. It really isn't. You don't need the advantage. Now, they have steady aim for that. And I'm perfectly fine with that, because it's not them trying to exploit some kind of rule, because I'm super smart. It's built into the rules now. Rogues can give themselves advantage, and they have to do it by not moving. I am perfectly fine with that. So yeah, as the rogue levels up, everything else about it is they get uncanny dodge, they get evasion. This is all stuff that existed before. They get reliable talent. Then they get things like improved cunning strike. You can use 2 cunning strike effects when you deal sneak attack damage. Devious strikes. They add 3 more things that you can use for your cunning strikes. It's really interesting. Like, everything about it is interesting. I love it. I think it's great. I wish this had always been how rogues work. When we get to the subclasses, they're really not that different. They work similar to how they were before, but anything that interacted with cunning action either is rewritten to just be its own thing, or now will have something to do with cunning strike. What was the other one? Let's go to the thief again. What was it? Maybe it wasn't. I thought there was another thing that they could do that would kind of modify stuff. Oh, yeah. Now they just have, as a bonus action, you can do stuff. So it no longer modifies cunning action, because, again, they don't care about cunning action anymore. But there will be things that can give you other uses for your bonus action. So yeah. Moving on. This is going to be a long video, folks. The Sorcerer. Sorcerers haven't made a massive change either. Again, the biggest change is the fact that Sorcerers don't get to choose their subclass at first level, which, again, is stupid. Just like the Warlock, it doesn't make sense that, well, at 3rd level you figure out what your heritage is. I don't know why you didn't have it at 1st level. But they do get this thing called innate sorcery, which is basically the spell saves your sorcerer spells, your spell save DCs for your sorcerer spells are increased by 1, and you have advantage on attack rolls that you cast as a sorcerer when you use a bonus action to activate your sorcerer thing. Lasts for a minute, does that stuff. So that in and of itself, it's interesting. They now have a built-in bonus action that just makes them better spellcasters. So that's cool. And then Font of Magic and Meta Magic, all that stuff happens right at Sis's 2nd level, which is perfectly fine. And then, yeah, your Sorcerer subclass you choose at 3rd level. Which, again, I'm not a big fan of. If it's innate in you, it shouldn't be something that you choose at 3rd level. But other than that, it's not that big a deal. Uh, Other than that, the innate sorcery thing, you eventually get the ability to burn sorcery points to use it because you only can use it twice per long rest. At 7, you get the ability to burn some sorcery points to activate it if you've already used all of it. And while innate sorcery is on, you can double dip on meta magic stuff, which I think is interesting. And then the capstone is kind of cool. While innate sorcery is on, you can use one meta magic option each turn without spending any sorcery points on it. So that's really interesting. And again, as a 20th level ability, that's super awesome. And meta magic is now so intrinsically tied with the sorcerer that turning it into they can just always use meta magic without any sorcery points and can double dip meta magic and stuff like that. It has to be while innate sorcery is on, but still, by level 20, you have a lot of sorcery points. You can use innate sorcery constantly. You'll probably never not be in combat without innate sorcery on. So yeah, meta magic options haven't changed. The new, or I guess twin spell did change, which is specifically when you cast a spell that if you cast it at higher levels, you can target multiple targets with it, like Charm Person. If you cast it at 2nd level, you can charm 2 people at the same time. Those are the only spells that twin spell works on. Which I can kind of understand. A lot of people use twin spell to get around having to use quicken spell for a lot of different things. So now if you want to cast 2 spells in a turn, you have to use quicken spell. So yeah, other than that, like I said, not a ton has changed. The subclasses in and of themselves are not that different. I don't think any of them really interact with the new innate sorcery. So yeah, because they don't have to interact with this new system, nothing really changes. They're cool. Like, none of them are bad. Like, Aberrant Sorcery, you're a psychic. Clockwork Sorcery, you really like gadgets. Draconic Sorcery, you have a thing for dragons. And Wild Magic Sorcery, fuck you. I will say, the new Wild Magic Surge table is a lot nicer. There's no, you cast Fireball on yourself. There are some negative aspects, but none of them are going to fuck you over nearly as bad as the old Wild Magic Surge table. Wild Magic Surge is significantly nicer to you, which I kind of don't like. You know, one of the aspects that was a balancing aspect of the Wild Magic Sorcerer was the fact that things can go wrong. And now, for the most part, when things go wrong, they're annoying. They're not dangerous. And so because of that, Wild Magic Sorcery becomes more powerful because a lot of times, a lot of the things that you can get on here are really, really good. And are very beneficial for you. So it's just like getting extra spells or extra benefits while at the same time being a spellcaster. Like, that's... I don't know. I'm not particularly sold on the new Wild Magic Surge table, but it's up to you guys. I don't think it's a travesty or anything like that. Like the stupid Paladin bonus action smiting bullshit, but... Moving on. Let's talk about the Warlock. This is the one that I have the biggest problem with, because again, because everything has to be... You have to choose your subclass at 3rd level, which I get. They wanted to make things more simple. It was confusing that certain classes got subclasses at different levels. I get it. It doesn't work for the Warlock. Either make the subclass something different than this is what your pact is, or something, because the way it works right now, and I'm going to read this. I made an entire video about this, going into details about how uncomfortable the new version of the Warlock makes me, because there's a lot of manipulation and abuse language kind of coded into it, that I'm not sure if it was just written by someone that didn't understand what it was that they were creating, or if this was intentional to just make all warlocks victims, because being a victim is really popular now. But it's just, if you want my full in-depth dive into what this is, I made a video a few days ago specifically saying WotC made all warlocks victims, and I'm not okay with it, or something similar to that. Watch the video, you can hear my whole ideas. But for pact magic, this is the description they have for it. Through occult ceremony, you have formed a pact with a mysterious entity to gain magical powers. The entity is a voice in the shadows, its identity unclear, but its boon to you is concrete, the ability to cast spells. Mechanics. So that's the only lore. But effectively, what it's saying is you don't know who it is that you're dealing with. You just know that you're getting magic, and that's all that matters. And that is an abuse tactic. 100%. They conceal, an abuser will conceal what they want from you and just go, hey, doesn't matter. Doesn't matter who I am. It doesn't matter. I'm just giving you what you want. And that's all that really matters. You're getting what you want. Doesn't matter what I'm getting. You're getting what you want. This is an extremely common abuse tactic. And I'm not okay with this. There's already been arguments for years about the idea of, are warlock packs inherently negative? And people, I've had arguments with one of my players who plays a warlock, and wanted to play a warlock with a positive pact interaction with their pact master. I was perfectly fine with that, but I did have to set some ground rules to the idea of, well, due to the just inherent power imbalance, this can't be your best friend. Your pact master has to be your boss. And take it for someone not only with a business degree, but also someone that has over a decade of experience in retail and management. You cannot be friends with your boss. You just can't. You can be friendly with your boss, but your boss cannot be your friend while they're being your boss. After work, yes, you can be friends with your boss. But while they are your boss, while they are acting as your boss, they cannot be your friend. It doesn't work that way. It's not a healthy thing to have. You should not be hiring your friends to work for you. It ruins friendships, because your job as a manager is to put the business first. And your job as a friend is to put your friendship first. Those are mutually exclusive things. It's how it works. So there have been a lot of discussions about whether or not warlock packs are inherently negative situations, because there's always going to be a power balance. The pact master has all the power and the warlock has nothing. So now that it's not only that, but your pact master is intentionally hiding who they are so that you have no idea what it is that you're getting into bed with until your third level, which you might get your third level in the middle of a dungeon because you guys decided to take a long rest in a dungeon. And now they're going to be like, oh my God, I didn't realize that I made a pact with a demon. Beelzebub, I didn't think, I'm not a big fan. I don't want to be this. Okay, it's perfectly fine. I'll take all your magic away. And now you're stuck in the middle of a dungeon with a bunch of people that are trusting that you can use your magic. How does that sound? Well, I guess I have no choice now. Nothing about this is okay. As far as mechanics, the Warlock, for the most part, works the same as it always has. They just don't let you choose your pact at first level, which is dumb. You do get Eldritch Invocations at first level, and one of those invocations can be what used to be your pact boon, which is what you used to get at third level, and it worked perfectly fine. But you no longer are required to get a pact boon. There's other first level Eldritch Invocations that you can take. For the most part, the pact boons are just better than the other ones you can take. And then literally everything else you have to be a minimum of level 2 for the Eldritch Invocations. So yeah, for the most part, the Warlock plays almost identically to how it is, but the lore behind the Warlock has taken a massive change. And I'm not okay with it. I really don't like how this is coded. As far as the subclasses, you've got Archfey, Celestial, Fiend, and Great Old One. Archfey, Fiend, and Great Old One are right from 5.0 PHB. Celestial, I think, was either Tasha's or Xanathar's, but it was a fun Warlock to play. It was a healing-based Warlock. It's fun. Like, it's a really fun one. Then the other ones are perfectly fine. You know, each one has its own little gizmos and aspects to it that make it different. The Great Old One is still nonsense, but, you know, you're making a pact with Cthulhu. What did you expect? But yeah, overall, Warlock is my absolute least favorite, and I will not be making any of the changes. I will not be adopting any of the changes for the Warlock. It's bad. Moving on. I've almost gone through my bottle of water. That's how long this video is. Finally, we get the Wizard. Not a whole lot has changed with the Wizard, to be perfectly honest. It's basically the same. Yeah, I mean, other than the fact that you don't... it used to be you chose your Wizard subclass at 2nd level. Now you choose it at 3rd level. And nothing really changes. To be blunt, you get expertise in a single skill at level 2 to kind of make up for the fact that you're no longer getting your subclass at level 2. And then you get your subclass at level 3, and they work almost the same way as they did before. And yeah, everything else with the Wizard is the same. It's perfectly fine. I like the Wizard. It's always been a fun class to play. One thing that is a little bit different, when you choose your subclass, which subclasses are Abjurer, Diviner, Evoker, and Illusionist. So they stuck with Schools of Magic for this one. Because we're getting a Forgotten Realms Player's Guide next year, I will guarantee they're going to be adding in the Bladesinger, because the Bladesinger is intrinsically linked to Forgotten Realms. In 4th edition, we got the Bladesinger as part of the Forgotten Realms Player's Guide. I would love to see them bring back the Sword Mage, but technically the Eldritch Knight is the Sword Mage. It's just not as good. But these are just schools. With each one, like for Abjuration, one of the first things you get is Abjuration Savant. You will have a Savant thing that you get at level 3, which basically you get 2 extra spells that in your spell book from the Abjuration school. And then every time you gain access to a new level of spells, not anytime you learn a new spell, but anytime you gain access to a new level of new spells, you instantly get to learn 1 Abjuration spell. You get to add it to your spell book. That is really cool. I think it's really, really interesting that the school that you choose actually gives you extra spells that you know in that school. And it kind of, I don't want to say justify, it rewards you for waiting until 3rd level to choose it, because now you've been playing your wizard for a little bit. You're starting to get to know them a little bit better, and now you choose your school of magic, and you don't have to kind of plan from 1st level. Well, I'm going to be an abjurer, so I better take some abjuration spells. No, when you get to where it's going to actually matter, you're going to get extra spells, so that you are always going to be able to have plenty of things to interact with your subclass. And I think that's really, really great. Other than that, they work the way they've always worked. Abjurers get a spell ward that does cool shit. Divination wizards get to roll dice and then replace rolls later on with them in the day. Evokers get to bend spells around people. An illusionist, I think the illusionist is probably the one that's changed the most. but it's not a really big thing. They get the ability to summon, use the summon beast and summon phase spells. They always have them prepared, and they can do some special stuff with them if they cast them as illusions effectively. But other than that, it works. I've never actually played an illusion wizard, so if this is something that they always had, let me know in the comments down below. But overall, I think it's cool. So yeah. So that was the classes. So let's do the ritual. Moving on. And I need more water if I'm going to make it through this. So overall, those are the classes and the big changes that were made. Like I said, some of them are positive, some of them are a few of them are really stupid, and I hate them. But this isn't the only thing that's going to change how you play your character, because they've made some pretty massive changes to a lot of feats. And because now feats are no longer an optional rule, and because every single feat gives you a an ability score increase, players are going to be interacting with feats a lot more, and the changes to the feats are going to change how you play your character a lot more than even the class changes had. Including the stuff we're going to deal with in the next chapter, the origin feats and stuff like that. So, yeah, overall, like I said, I hope this is useful to you guys to give a better idea about how the classes are going to change. But understand, just because your class changed in a way that you like does not mean that overall everything in 5.5 is going to be beneficial to you. We still have 2 more sections that are going to change things drastically for how the game is played. So, moving on to the next chapter, finally. Chapter 4, Character Origins. They have combined the backgrounds chapter, which in the 5.0 in the 5.0 Player's Handbook, it was just called Personalities and Backgrounds. And then they had an entire chapter for races. They basically combined races and personality and backgrounds into one chapter, Character Origins, and they've made some pretty massive changes. First of all, ability score increases are no longer tied to your race or your lineage or whatever you want to call them. They're now tied entirely to your background, which is a choice. This is another thing that feels like taking a step backwards, because once Tasha's came out, we already had the fact of, well, you can use the ability scores that are linked to the race, or you can just choose the ability scores you want. And that system worked perfectly fine. People are upset about it. They're like, whoa, well, I like my races having particular things. Then fine, use them. It was an optional rule. They still are being presented with, these are the ability score bonuses of this particular race. That still existed. There was never anything stopping you. And now they've taken the step back where each background will have 3 of the 6 ability scores listed. And you can either choose to increase all 3 of those ability scores by 1, or 1 of them by 2, and 1 of them by 1. But they're still making it more difficult for you to create a character. Now, because the background is already going to kind of be combining with your character concept, it's not quite as limiting as the species one, but it still feels like a step back. Why? We already had a rule that worked perfectly. Just choose the ability scores you want. It's not that big a deal. But no, they're like, well, no, we gotta limit their decisions somehow, so that's what we're gonna do. In addition to that, Each background gives you an origin feat. And some of them are useful. I want to emphasize some of them because a lot of them aren't. And there's not many. Of the different backgrounds that are here, which backgrounds are they? Target of a background. Do they not list them? There they are. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. I think of the 16 there, I think there's only 8 origin feats. So the old version of backgrounds, each background had a background feature that was really cool. And they were all unique. Now, backgrounds all have an origin feat, and they share it with at least one other background. And some of these origin feats are boring as fuck. Let's go like the Acolyte. The Acolyte, the entire description of it is 5 sentences, and they are really, really short sentences. The feat that you get is Magic Initiate Cleric. So 2 cantrips for a Cleric built into your background, which is pretty useful, and 2 first level spells from a Cleric. That's really, really nice. The Artisan, which again has a 5-sentence description, gets the Crafter feat, which gives you proficiency in another tool. When you buy non-magical items, you get a 20% discount. And after a long rest, you can craft something from the fast crafting table. So like if you have carpenter's tools, you can make a single ladder or a torch. That is just as useful as being able to cast Firebolt at will. Most definitely. If you have potter's tools, you can make a jug or a lamp. See the problem with this? It's just not that useful. The Charlatan was one of my favorite backgrounds because the feature for the Charlatan was you could use a forgery kit to recreate anything any document you'd seen perfectly. Do you know how incredibly useful that is? Create your own patents of nobility, create invitations to any party you ever want to go to, create a really cool letter of introduction from the king itself because you watched him sign something once, so now you can just replicate his signature. Massively awesome. You want to know what skill does? You have proficiency in a few more skulls. Oh boy, that's some super cool stuff for the Charlatan. So I'm not thrilled with the new backgrounds. Some of the stuff like the criminal, the feature for criminals before was Underworld Contact. You could get information. Now it's Alert, which is it's a decent feat. Don't get me wrong. You can't be surprised, but you can also just have a Weapon of Warning, and that gives you advantage on initiative. And I don't think Alert does that. No, you can add your proficiency bonus to initiative. It's Alert doesn't even stop you from being surprised. You add proficiency bonus to initiative, and immediately after you roll initiative, you can swap your initiative with somebody else. That's what Alert does. Again, Acolytes get access to magic. Criminals can add their proficiency bonus to their initiative. That's pretty good. Overall, like everything, musician's even more useless. Tough is actually a pretty decent skill. And then both guards and criminals have access to the Alert feat. It's another thing that just doesn't make sense. Again, this is the problem with 5.5 is they came up with some cool ideas. Okay, Let's give them all origin feats. That's what background features were, where they were origin feats. But because now you can take origin feats anytime you get a feat, so now they had to make them less specific, because being able to just take a background feature breaks a few of the background features. Like the charlatan feature, again, it's just a massively useful thing. So they had to make them significantly more generic. And because of that, they just didn't make enough to be interesting. And so now you have double dipping and things like that. And it's not cool. I don't like this new system. Again, it feels like a step backwards. And I prefer the background features. They're just better. 100% of the time. The lucky feat they changed completely, and now it's either you can give yourself advantage on a roll, or you can give someone disadvantage on a roll. That's it. There's no re-rolling anymore. Lucky used to be really, really useful. Now it's mostly useless. Yeah. Overall, not a huge fan of the new backgrounds. They're just dumb. Species, on the other hand, despite the fact that they no longer have attribute bonuses built into them, because that's racist for some odd reason, they do still have traits built into them. And some of them are cool. Like Azamar, they have this healing hands thing. Basically, it gives you the ability to heal without using a spell slot. It's really cool. And then their Celestial Revelation is basically, there used to be 3 different flavors of Azamar. This is where they kind of bring that back. Dragonborn, I do like the Dragonborn. It's very, very similar. I don't think it's identical, but it's very, very similar to the Bibby's Guide to Dragons version of the Dragonborn, in the idea that breath weapon is actually useful. You can use it a number of times equal to your proficiency bonus, so they didn't tie it to a ability score, which I'm very, very happy with. And they also get the ability to fly eventually, which I'm fine with. It's temporary. Use a bonus action to give yourself magic wings, but it's still like Dragonborn are super cool. Dwarves kind of get the short end of the stick. Resistance to poison damage, extra hit points, and then, I guess Stonecutting, now they get Tremor Sense for 10 minutes, which is cool. So yeah, I mean, even the dwarves, which aren't quite as cool as some of the other ones, still get cool stuff. Like the new species stuff in 5.5, I'm game. Like, this is cool stuff. My only issue with it is there's no Eladrin. And I like Eladrin. But they'll probably introduce that in the Forgotten Realms along with the Blade Singers. So it's not that big a deal. Everything else, like I said, there's cool stuff in here. They have Goliaths that are part of it. That, again, they had... they take some inspiration from the Giant Source book that I can't remember what it's called now, to give you a bunch of cool things that you get to choose when you choose your Goliath. You get to choose which giant ancestry you have, and each one gives you something cool that you can do, including one of which just gives you a teleport, which is cool. Anything gives you teleports, I'm a fan of. Halflings still get halfling luck. They're never getting rid of that. And then humans... This is another thing where they really, really limit the humans. Humans get the versatile trait, which lets you get an origin feat of your choice. You don't get to pick a feat. You specifically get an origin feat. And as we've already discovered, a lot of the origin feats are next to worthless. One of the things that was really, really common, you would take a variant human, you would take something like dual wielding or dual wielder, so that you could dual wield longswords right from level 1, or you would take Great Weapon Master and be a barbarian and piss off everybody at the table because you one-shot everything. Like, it used to be a really, really useful, powerful thing, and now you just get an extra origin feat, which the vast majority of them are not useful, and I wouldn't choose them if it wasn't for the fact that they're tied to a background. So that's a really, really just horrible thing. Orcs works. Now you are orcs. There are no half creatures. Which that in and of itself, I actually had a friend of mine that brought up something that I was not aware of. They've basically erased the idea of mixed race people from Dungeons and Dragons, and that has upset people that are actually of mixed race. Because one of my players is mixed race, and actually kind of brought this up. It's like, no, this is mixed race erasure. This is not okay. And because I mean, technically I am, because I'm a European mutt. I've got some Polish in me and some Jewish in me and some Irish in me and a lot, like, I'm like half of Europe is in there somewhere. But they're all white. So I never really consider myself mixed raced because no one else does. I have a lot of heritage that's very interesting. Like, my Irish heritage is very different than my Polish heritage, which is very different than my Jewish heritage. But it's not the same as someone like a Mexican American who has, traditions from the Mexican half of their family, and then traditions from the American half of their family that might have European roots and things like that. Like, that is a huge, huge part of their lives, and they've just completely gotten rid of it. Again, understand why they did it, because a bunch of people got pissed off about half orcs and all these other things, but it was dumb. They made a bad decision here. And then the final one, tieflings. Again, not a lot has changed with tieflings. They have introduced kind of different flavors of tieflings. Like, the original tiefling in the player's handbook was kind of boring. And they have kept adding more kind of flavors of tieflings as new source books have been released. Basically, all the different options that they've released are now here. You have abyssal tieflings, chthonic tieflings, and infernal tieflings, and they're all interesting. Like, they're you want your traditional kind of tiefling, infernal. You get your hellish rebuke, get your darkness, go. I think chthonic is probably the one that I find the most interesting. But yeah, overall, backgrounds, I fucking hate them. But the species, the vast majority of them, other than the fact that they've completely erased mixed species characters, I like the new species. I like the new character options and stuff like that. I think they're really interesting. So, yeah. Moving on. Chapter 5. Feats. This is the other thing that is massively going to change how you play your character. Because there are a lot of feats that have the same name, but play massively differently. They separate them into 3 different groups. You have the origin feats, which again, let's actually count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So there's 10 of them. And for the most part, they're not that great. Alerts, okay, slightly higher initiative, and you can switch places with someone. Crafter, you can make some mostly useless shit every so often, and you get a 20% discount on non-magical shit. Whoop-de-frickin-do. Healer works for the most part the same way as the healer feat did before, and the healer feat was one of the feats that I really felt a lot of people slept on. It's a very useful feat. However, now that magical healing is significantly more powerful, this is another one of those things where it seems like they just forgot that they made healing more useful. Now you can use a healer's kit. It used to be you just gave them a D8 of hit points, which was useless. Now they can expend a hit die, and they get hit points plus your proficiency bonus, but it's required them to use one of their hit dice. So technically it means if you have a larger hit die, it means you're going to be able to get more hit points, but it's really not that great. Again, they revamped healing in the most simple way possible, and then they just forgot that, oh yeah, anywhere else where healing happens, if we want it to actually be useful, because it does take your action to do this, you need to increase the healing, and they didn't. So the healer feat was kind of a slept-on feat. There was a lot of ways to use it. Now that healing's been improved, it's kind of a useless feat. Lucky, like I said, now all you can do is either give yourself or someone else advantage. Or wait, no, only you. You can give, when you roll a d20, you can give yourself advantage. And when a creature rolls an attack roll against you, you can give them disadvantage. That's the only thing that you can do. Compared to what it was where it just lets you re-roll dice and random dice that you wanted re-rolled, Lucky is an almost useless feat. Magic Initiate is just as useful as it has been, except for the fact they added the spells that you learn with Magic Initiate you can cast using spell slots in addition to just using the feat. The old version of it, you couldn't do that. So it's just a better version of Magic Initiate. It is by far the best origin feat at all. Like, it's really, really useful. Musician. After you finish a short or long rest, you can give your allies Heroic Inspiration, so they can get one advantage. Yay. Savage Attacker. You can roll the weapon's damage dice twice and use either roll. Whoop-de-doo. Skilled. You get 3 more skills. Tavern Brawler is actually really cool because it gives you unarmed strikes do more damage. You can re-roll ones on your damage rolls for unarmed strikes, and you can deal damage and push the target as part of an unarmed strike. So even a monk can actually get a benefit from Tavern Brawler because of that push action aspect of it. And that also means that, again, that used to be something that open hand monks, that was something they could do, is they just got to push stuff when they did their flurry of blows. And now it's built into Tavern Brawler, so they had to find a new way to make them special. It didn't quite work. Tough is just always useful. So is the origin feats. When we get to the general feats, I'm not going to go through every single one of them because a lot of them are very, very similar. But some of the ones that are very, very different. Crossbow Expert has been massively changed, and I like it. You ignore the loading property of crossbows in general. So that's one thing that makes crossbows difficult because unless you have Crossbow Expert, doesn't matter how many attacks you have, you can only make one attack with a crossbow because of the loading property. Also, if you're holding one of them, you can load a piece of ammunition into it even if you lack a free hand. That was one of the biggest issues with using hand crossbows. And it was one of the things that they would say is like, well, you can't like dual wield hand crossbows because then there's no way for you to load it. They specifically put it in there so you can have a crossbow in your offhand and have like something that was really, really famous for Drow in the Forgotten Realms is they would use a sword and a hand crossbow. And according to 5th edition rules, that meant you only got one attack with that hand crossbow. And then either you had to put the sword away to be able to reload it, or there was nothing you can do. With Crossbow Expert, you can have a crossbow, a hand crossbow in your offhand and have something in your main hand and still be able to use the hand crossbow, which has the light property, and we're going to deal with that as well. Firing in melee, being within 5 feet of an enemy doesn't pose a disadvantage on your attack rolls with a crossbow. So it used to be a lot of people would take the Crossbow Expert thing because it just said being within 5 feet of an enemy doesn't pose disadvantage on ranged attack rolls. And there were wizards that would take it simply so they could point blank cast spells because they were ranged magic attacks. Now it's just on crossbows. Don't worry, there's other things for wizards. It's not that bad. But the final thing for Crossbow Expert, dual wielding. When you make the extra attack of the light property, you can add your ability modifier damage of the extra attack. If that attack is with a crossbow that has the light property, and you aren't already adding a modifier to the damage, you can dual wield crossbows, guys. You can do the whole Demon Hunter. You can do it. It's super cool. I love everything about this. Crossbow Expert, definitely a glow up. They have the feats from Tasha's, like Crusher, Slicer, Piercer. They're exactly the same. I mentioned before, Defensive Duelist has been upgraded. It used to be, if you have a finesse weapon, somebody makes a melee attack and hits you, you use your reaction to add your proficiency bonus to your AC for that attack, which was really good. Especially at high levels, that's a +6 to your AC. It's better than shield. Now, you gain this bonus to your AC against melee attacks until the start of your next turn. Won't do anything for ranged attacks, but any melee attacks, you now have a shield. Defensive Duelist, another one that's really, really glow up. Dual Wielder, I mentioned before, I'm going to have to do an entire video on this because I had this really interesting discussion with someone that's very knowledgeable about this particular thing. And what they claim is that dual wielding, again, this is the first edition of D&D where you cannot dual wield 2 longswords. Dual wielder used to be, hey, now when you do 2-weapon fighting, they don't have to have the light property. That's not what dual wielder does anymore. It's this really strangely worded thing that basically says one of the weapons doesn't have to have the light property, but the other one does. So it's not possible to dual wield longswords anymore, which is stupid. It's been something that you could do in the game since its inception, and now you can't. Now, some people are claiming because of the Nick Weapon Mastery property, this means that you can use the Nick Weapon Mastery property to do the 2-weapon fighting additional attack that's normally in your bonus action, that you do that as part of your attack action. And this specifically says you can make an extra attack as a bonus action on the same turn with a different weapon, which must be a melee weapon that lacks the two-handed property. The way dual wielder worked before, it was worded kind of in a similar way, but it basically just meant you don't have to have the light property. Now people are claiming that, well, that means that if you use a light weapon with the Nick property, then you can now make 2 extra attacks effectively with offhand weapons. One from Nick, one from dual wielder. And I don't agree with that interpretation because it breaks the game. It makes dual wielding specifically with a Nick weapon better than any other option. It is, if you are a melee-based character, dual wielder and a weapon with a Nick property is always going to be the right solution, because there's never going to be a situation where you are going to do more damage with anything else. You're always going to be doing more damage if that is the way that this is intended to be. And again, good game design gives you choices. Bad game design gives you right answers, and this is a right answer. The rest of them, there's not a whole lot of real big changes. The grappler feat's a little bit different, but not by a ton. I'm not going to go into it. Great Weapon Master and Sharpshooter are both ones that have been massively changed. Great Weapon Master used to be take 5 off your attack, do 10 extra damage. Now, you hit a creature with a weapon that has the heavy property as part of the attack action, so no bonus action attacks or anything like that. You can cause the weapon to deal extra damage equal to your proficiency bonus. So significantly less damage, but there's no penalty. This is just anytime you hit a creature with it. So there's no more choice of, well, I'm going to make a Great Weapon Master to attack. So overall, I think the overall damage with Great Weapon Master is going to be higher, simply because you're not going to miss as much at lower levels. At higher levels, you weren't missing. Like Barbarians weren't missing their Great Weapon Master attacks. They had advantage on their attacks, and once you get to around mid-tier 2, you're generally not missing your attacks that often. So the idea of, well, now you just always get the attack. You were always getting it before. That's why people didn't like Great Weapon Master before, or DMs didn't like Great Weapon Master before. So that's a really big deal. The other thing, longbows have the heavy property. So Great Weapon Master can actually be used for range-based characters because heavy is not a melee-only ability. This does require you to have a strength of 13 or higher. So it does mean if you want to be like a ranger that uses Great Weapon Master, you can't lowball your strength score. Bare minimum, you have to have a 13 or higher for your strength if you want to be able to do this, and that would be very useful. Especially since, I'm trying to see if there's anything else before we go to Sharpshooter. There really isn't. They're most the same. Oh, I mentioned the Polearm Master before. Polearm Master doesn't let you make an opportunity attack when something comes into your range. It specifically lets you use your reaction to make an attack. So it no longer synergizes with the Sentinel feat. So that combo is no longer a thing, which isn't a bad thing because it was a stupid combo anyway. Sharpshooter is the other one that's really, really big. Requires dexterity of 13. And all it does, your attacks ignore cover. You don't get disadvantage on ranged attacks with ranged weapons when you're within 5 feet. And attacking at long range doesn't impose disadvantage on your attacks with ranged weapons. But there's nothing in the Sharpshooter feat that increases the damage that you do. So the main reason most people took the Sharpshooter feat was to get that additional damage. Half cover and 3/4 cover really isn't used that often. In every single written adventure, if there's more than maybe 2 or 3 encounters in the entire campaign adventure, hardbook adventure, that mention half cover or 3/4 cover for the enemies, I would be surprised. It's very rarely, if ever, used. Most DMs don't tend to use it. It's just not a thing. And then a longbow, which is what most of the people that were using Sharpshooter were using, already has like 160 or 180 foot range for their short range and a 600 foot long range. There is never a situation in Dungeons and Dragons where your battle map is more than 160 feet wide. It doesn't matter that you can shoot 600 feet without rolling disadvantage. You're not going to use that. The big benefit of Sharpshooter was that Sharpshooter shot, and it doesn't exist anymore. And if you want the thing that basically replaces it, you need to have a 13 strength, which is weird. So yeah. Other than that, the rest of them, it's not that big a deal. They're the same stuff that you're doing. They do have a weapon mastery feat where if you don't have the weapon mastery property and you want to be able to use weapon mastery, you take the feat and you get weapon mastery of one simpler martial weapon of your choice. And whenever you finish a long rest, you can change. So again, it doesn't matter that you're only getting one, because unless you're dual wielding, you're only going to be using one at a time anyway. So yeah, moving on. Chapter 6. Equipment. It's the same chapters before. It tells you what everything is. Electrum pieces are still a thing. I know that upsets some people. They still have electrum pieces. The weapons haven't changed. They added in, like I said, the masteries, but there's only 8 of them for almost 40 weapons, and half of them are 2 of them are just not useful. 2 of them are useful in specific situations, and 4 of them are very useful. And the Nick property is more useful than literally anything else. Because again, if it combines with, even if it doesn't combine with the dual wielder feat the way that some people are arguing that it does, it still allows you to use your bonus action while dual wielding. And that's a really, really big deal. It means one of the biggest issues with 2-weapon fighting Rangers in 5th edition is you're so reliant on Hunter's Mark. If you're 2-weapon fighting, you are always losing at least one attack every time you have to switch your Hunter's Mark target. And because it's concentration, you're going to be losing it and wasting the spell and then having to spend another bonus action to do it. It just didn't work very well. With the Nick option, it means that you can now move your Hunter's Mark target and still make all of your attacks in the same turn. It means that when you're not using your Hunter's Mark, you can use your bonus action for something else, which can be a lot of things. One of the feats they have lets you burn your hit dice as a bonus action to regain health. You get a self-heal. Like, there's so many different things that having your bonus action available, it makes dual wielding significantly more viable than it ever has been in the game. So the Nick property in and of itself is probably by far the most valuable weapons mastery property in the entire game. The other stuff can be useful. The push weapon mastery is very useful. Every time you hit them, you can move them. The Vex gives you advantage on your next attack roll against the creature, literally anytime you hit and damage a creature. So theoretically, if you are always using Vex weapons, your first attack, you're going to have to make the attack normally. But after that, you can basically always give yourself advantage. So for rogues that are worried about not being able to get their sneak attack for whatever reason, that always want that advantage and don't want to have to use that steady aim thing, well then, take a Vex weapon. There's quite a few of them, and every single time you hit, you grant yourself advantage again. It's only the first time you hit something that you're going to need to find a way to get advantage, or you're going to have to hope you can hit without it, which isn't that hard. So Vex, in and of itself, it's nice and does some cool stuff. Slow isn't useful. Sap, they get disadvantage on its next attack roll. As soon as creatures start getting multi-attack, Sap is really not that useless because they're only missing possibly one attack. Topple, you can knock them prone. Very, very useful. It's more useful than Slow because Slow reduces their speed by 10 feet. Topple reduces their speed by half. Because either they can only crawl or they have to use half their movement speed to stand up. Topple is just a better version of Slow every single time. Trying to think, was there another one that we haven't talked? Oh, Cleave. Cleave is another one that... Cleave is one of the ones that in certain situations it's useful, but otherwise it's not. You hit something with it, you can hit you can make another attack against a creature within 5 feet of the target. Not within 5 feet of you, within 5 feet of the target. And you can only do that once per turn, so you can't just keep doing it over and over and over and over again. So Cleave, again, it's a cool thing, but it's very, very limited. Again, compared to something like Nick, it's nothing. So, yeah, like I said, weapon mastery in and of itself, I like the idea. They just didn't make enough different weapon masteries, and it's a half-baked idea. And there were some that were really, really good, and then they realized, well, we can't just give everything the same weapon mastery. So quick, let's come with another one. You give them a disadvantage on a single attack roll. Not useful. Once you hit level 5, becomes significantly less useful. Once you hit tier 3, it's next to useless. Because you have monsters that are making 3, 4, 5 attacks in a turn. One of them gets disadvantaged. Oh boy! It's not useful. Slow. 10 feet of movement speed? Again, once you hit level 5, half the monsters have 40 or 50 feet of movement speed. You're doing next to nothing. So, yeah. Other than that, the mastery, like I said, the idea behind the mastery properties is good. And there's a few that are really, really useful. There's just so many others that just aren't. And that's upsetting. Armor hasn't changed. Tools, adventuring gear, none of that stuff is really changed almost at all. They do have a crafting equipment thing that basically gives you rules for how to make spell scrolls, which has already existed, and rules on how to create things like potions of healing. They're not that great, but they do have actual codified rules for how players can make a potion of healing, and it's not great. To create a potion of healing requires 25 gold, so it's half the price of buying a potion of healing, and it requires 8 hours of work. Okay, now the players can create potions of healing for half price, but they literally have to take an adventuring day to make a single potion. It's not that beneficial. It's just not. And again, that's the thing that keeps happening is when they try to create something cool, they'll create something, but then they're so terrified of people abusing it that they put these limitations on it that make it just worthless. Is it worth wasting an entire adventuring day to be able to pay half price for potions? No, especially if you have the crafter origin feat, you already get 20% off. So you can get them for 40 gold instead of 50, and you can buy 20 in a day. It's just not useful. Moving on. Chapter 7. Spells. The biggest change with spells is, again, you can only cast one leveled spell per turn, which for bonus action spell casting means something, but it also means you are no longer able to counterspell a counterspell on your own spell. What do I mean by that? Something that happens constantly is character starts casting a spell. Enemy counterspells. Player goes, I counterspell them. You can't do that anymore because counterspell is a leveled spell, and the spell you were casting was a leveled spell. You can only cast one leveled spell per turn. Now, if it's not your turn, you can still counterspell. But there is no longer the ability to counterspell the counterspell by the same person that did it, which is a nice solution to the problem of the infinite counterspell loop. Now you're not going to, I counterspell, well, I counterspell, well, I counterspell. This is not happening anymore. So that's the big change in how magic works. Everything else, it's about the same. They change how a lot of different spells work. I'm not going to go through all of them here. You'll have to read the book to figure out how all the different spells have changed. A lot of them are better versions of spells. I can't think of any spells that I've seen that I thought that the changes were negative. Who would have thought Wizards of the Coast made sure that the wizards have lots of cool stuff that they can do while they fucked over other classes. And then again, healing spells, for the most part, they've just had their healing doubled. So now healing is actually viable in D&D 5th edition, which is good. Are there other stuff that changes? Absolutely. But going through this entire book of spells is just not worth it. I do find it interesting that they used almost the same exact art from the 5.0 PHB to show the different shapes of magic, and again they added a single new type of magic, the emanation and sphere. So that's it. So all they did is add the word emanation to something, that artwork that already exists, and I think it's literally the exact same artwork. Everything else is all new. So other than that, it's spells. There's really not a whole lot to talk about other than there's lots of spells. So moving on. Appendix A. The Multiverse. Really, really short. I don't know how much it is in the physical book because I didn't get the digital physical bundle for this. I don't have the money for it. Owning your own home is great, and I'm very, very happy for my brother. But also, owning your own home sucks because you have to pay for everything when it breaks. We had a few different things kind of break all around the same time, so I'm broke. There's a really nice illustration of the inner planes and the outer planes that I like, and then there is a single sentence for every plane, and that's the whole thing. Congratulations. Again, if this takes longer than like 3 or 4 pages, I would be very, very surprised. It is the tiniest little thing. Appendix B is creature stat blocks. It's basically the same thing that they had in the player's handbook. It's just basically stat blocks for Find Familiar and for Wild Shaping. And that's really it. Like there's nothing else there. There is a thing called a Sphinx of Wonder, and they have a Slad Tadpole. I have no idea why they put those in this book. But they are cool looking. So that's cool. And then the final section is the Rules Glossary. It's very nice. Has all the different stuff that you would want and relatively easy to find it. But overall, that is the Player's Handbook. Moving on. 2 final thoughts. This has been over 3 hours I've been doing this, folks. There are a lot of things to like about the new Player's Handbook. There really are. A lot of changes to the classes are really interesting. But at the same time, there's a lot of stuff in there that just feels like they're taking steps back. And it frustrates the hell out of me because I would have loved to just go, hey, yeah, let's just use 5.5. It's great. And I can't. There are so many parts of that book that I can't use because they're either poorly created or they create issues that don't need to be there. Like, it's just over and over and over again. They just have bad stuff in there. And they play tested this stuff and somehow it still came out. I don't understand who it was that was telling them that the slow weapon mastery property was useful and should stay in the game. I don't. It's a useless ability. So, and that's my issue that I have with the 5.5 Player's Handbook as a whole. Is that there's a lot of good ideas in there. And there's a lot of good starts. But then it gets screwed up by bad implementations. And yeah, this could have used another 2 years, or at least another year of playtesting to come out with something that was actually really, really good. The Player's Handbook, the 5.0 Player's Handbook was amazing. It revolutionized how role-playing games were played. It was really, really great. And this is just not that. I sincerely doubt you're going to see a lot of people using a lot of the new 5.5 stuff. And again, a lot of the stuff that works well in it is just tiny changes to stuff that already exists in Tasha's. Like, again, the Ranger is perfectly fine in this book. But it's basically the same Ranger we got in Tasha's. So it's not like they reinvented the wheel. And then when they did make big changes, sometimes they're really, really awesome. Cunning Strike is super awesome. I'd like a few more options for it. Because grand total, I think there's only a grand total of 6 different things you can do with Cunning Strike. So I would have liked to see maybe a few more options, or maybe your ability to choose some instead of just you can do these things, and then when you get up to a higher level, you can do these things. I think it would have been cooler to have maybe, pick these things from a list, but that would require them to make sure that every single option was viable, and they just generally don't do that. So those things were cool. But then you have things like the new Paladin Smite system, which is just broken. And it punishes a group that is already disadvantaged to the point where it's just not going to be fun to play a Paladin. And then the whole Warlock issue is still really bothering me. And I don't understand how nobody thought about this with how much power dynamics are constantly harped on everywhere. I don't understand how no one thought that, oh, I hear a mysterious voice and it won't reveal to me who it really is until I've been using it for long enough to be addicted to the power. That's not inappropriate in any way, shape, or form. Hello? So, yeah. Overall, I would have loved to fall in love with 5.5. As it is right now, not pleased with it. And part of that was my expectations coming into it, because the monk changes that I saw excited me. And if I hadn't read into the monk stuff and I'd waited until this, I probably would not be quite as upset, because it really did excite me, and I didn't really have a whole lot of problems. I didn't notice them taking away a bunch of spells from the Shadow Monk until I actually read it. But yeah, I kind of wish I hadn't learned about that, and I could have seen everything all at once. Because I probably would have been a little bit less disappointed in the PHB 5.5. Again, it's not bad. It's not the end of D&D as we know it. But I just don't... There's not enough here that makes me get excited about, wow, what could they do next? Most of the subclasses aren't different from the subclasses that existed before. So if they quote-unquote update more subclasses, it's probably not going to change much. If they make new subclasses, who knows? Maybe we could get some new classes out of this. Who knows? Maybe we'll finally get that Psionicist class. That would be cool, though I sincerely doubt it, since they've relegated psionics to a bunch of feats and then a subclass or two here or there. But yeah, I think 5th edition is a great system. And while there were some issues inherent into 5th edition, they weren't that bad. And 5.5 was not the answer. I don't think it's going to extend the lifespan of 5th edition that much more than it would have. It's already the longest running edition of D&D. So that's perfectly fine. But to me, this feels like the beginning of the end of 5th edition. We're going to get some more source books because they need to make money off of it, which is perfectly fine. But I'm not really looking forward to them that much. I'll be interested to see what the DMG is, because maybe the DMG will actually be really useful. Who knows? And I'm interested to see the new monster manual, because they keep claiming that they fixed the problem with challenge rating and monster design. I don't think they have. But I would love to be pleasantly surprised with the monster manual. But once we get the monster manual out, I think, for the most part, the next thing that will excite me about Dungeons & Dragons will be 6th edition. Because at this point, I'm kind of done with 5th. It's not that it's a bad edition, but I have played literally thousands of hours in it. And there are hundreds of tabletop RPGs out there that are just as interesting as 5th edition. So I'm going to be spending more time doing non-D&D stuff unless something in the DMG or the monster manual completely blows my mind. And I just don't see that happening, because the PHB was less than underwhelming. There was a few things in there that were just flat out insulting. So, interested to hear your guys' ideas. Yeah. Anyway, that is going to be all for me today. As always, please remember to like the video, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell icon to turn notifications on. All those things are super, super important. In the comments down below. What is your opinion on anything in here? This is a 3.5-hour video. Do you think I'm too hard on 5.5? Are there feats that I didn't mention that you think are really, really cool in 5.5? Are there class features that I glanced over, maybe that I pointed in a negative light, that you think are significantly better than what I'm saying? Disagree with me or agree with me, but put it in the comments down below. Otherwise, again, this is all for me today. I will see you guys in the next time. All right? Bye-bye.